The journey was no worse than she expected. A train from London to Liverpool, the steam packet overnight to Dublin, a slow Sunday train west to a town called Athlone. A driver was waiting. Mrs. Wright. He carried her trunk to the cart. Lib settled herself on the single bench down the middle. She put up her umbrella against the drizzle. On the other side of the bench, the driver flicked his whip. "Go on now." The shaggy pony stirred. Flat fields striped with dark foliage, sheets of reddish-brown peat, the occasional grey remains of a cottage almost greened over. All the matron at the hospital had said was that an experienced nurse was required for 2 weeks in a private capacity. The costs of keep and travel to and from Ireland to be furnished, as well as a daily consideration. Lib knew nothing about the O'Donnells, except that she'd be quite well paid for her trouble, and the novelty of the thing held some interest. Another roofless cabin now, turned away from the road, its gabled walls accusing the sky. Lib glimpsed a mess of black through the door-shaped hole. A recent conflagration, then. More cabins, some with 3 or 4 windows. Barns, sheds, a 2-story farmhouse. Whitewash glared from a building with a pointed roof up ahead, a cross on top, which meant a Roman Catholic chapel. Only when the driver reined in did Lib realise that this had to be the village, although by English standards it was no more than a sorry-looking cluster of buildings. "You're to put up at the Spirit Grocery." "I beg your pardon?" "Ryan's." The driver nodded left to a building with no sign. Stiff after the journey, Lib let the man hand her down, and she stepped into the low-beamed shop. The reek of burning peat hit her. Apart from the fire smouldering under a massive chimney, only a couple of lamps lit the room, where a girl was nudging a canister into its row on a high shelf. "Good evening," said Lib. "You'll be the Englishwoman," said the girl. "Would you care to step into the back for a bit of supper?" She went through the door beside the chimney and found herself in a small, windowless room, occupied by a nun whose face was almost invisible behind the starched layers of her headdress. "Good evening," she said. The nun answered with a deep bow. Lib sat at the only other table, facing away from the nun, and waited. When at last the girl brought in the tray, the nun bent her head down and whispered grace. An odd assortment of dishes: oat bread, cabbage, fish of some sort. Everything tasted of peat, but Lib set about clearing her plate. Since Scutari, where the nurses' rations had been as short as the men's, Lib had been incapable of wasting a bite. "Mrs. Wright?" She turned her head. The stranger in the doorway tapped his waistcoat. "Dr. McBrearty." That was the name of the O'Donnells' physician, Lib remembered. She stood to shake his hand. Straggly white side whiskers, very little hair above. 70, perhaps? "Good of you to travel all this way," the doctor remarked. "If you've quite finished." She followed him out into the shop. The girl, lifting a lamp, beckoned them up the narrow staircase. The bedroom was poky. Lib's trunk took up much of the floor. "Now, Mrs. Wright," he said as soon as they were alone, and gestured for her to take the single rush chair. "You're a widow, I understand. You took up nursing when you found yourself, thrown on your own resources." She nodded. She'd happened on an article about the thousands of soldiers suffering from gunshot wounds or cholera, and no one to tend them. The Times had announced that £7,000 had been raised to send a party of Englishwomen to the Crimea as nurses. That, Lib had thought, with dread but also a sense of daring. I believe I could do that. She'd lost so much already. She was reckless. "A nightingale," marvelled Dr. McBrearty. "Yes, I had the honour of serving under her at Scutari." He nodded. "Have you ever nursed a child, Mrs. Wright?" "I would expect the principles to be the same." "Why, is my patient a child?" "Anna O'Donnell. I've not been told her complaint." "She's not exactly ill. Your only duty will be to watch her, to observe. It's a most unusual case. Anna O'Donnell claims, or rather her parents claim, that she hasn't taken food since her 11th birthday. No sustenance of any kind. She can't take a thing but clear water. Has the poor child some gastric obstruction? None that I've been able to find." Lib was at a loss. "How long has it been since her birthday?" "April this was, 4 months ago yesterday." Lib would have laughed out loud if it weren't for her training. Doctor, the child would be dead by now. He nodded. It's a great mystery. That wasn't the word Lib would have chosen. Is she bedridden, at least? He shook his head. Anna walks around like any other girl. Emaciated? She's always been a mite of a thing, but no. She hardly seems to have altered since April. This was ludicrous. And she's in full possession of all of her faculties, added McBrady. In fact, the O'Donnells have become convinced she can live without food. Incredible. I'm not surprised you're sceptical, Mrs. Wright. I was too. Meanwhile, our village has become a byword for credulous backwardness. Several of the important men hereabouts feel that the honour of the county, possibly of the whole Irish nation, is at stake. So a committee's been formed and a decision taken to mount a watch and bring the truth to light, whatever the truth may be. 2 scrupulous attendants will stay by Anna, turn and turn about, night and day for a fortnight. The second nurse, I don't suppose I know her. The doctor frowned. Didn't you make Sister Michael's acquaintance at supper? The almost speechless nun, Lib should have guessed. She had served alongside others of that order in Scutari. They were reliable workers, at least, she told herself. We're to report to you then, in 2 weeks. He shook his head. As Anna's physician, I could be considered an interested party, so it's to the assembled committee that you're to testify on oath. Lib looked forward to it. Yourself and Sister Michael separately, he added, without any conferring. We wish to hear to what view each of you comes, quite independently of the other. Her hand shot up to cover a sudden yawn. I better leave you now, said McBrady. Must be almost 10. Lib slept well, considering. The sun came up just before 6. By then she was in her uniform from the hospital, grey tweed dress, worsted jacket, white cap. She breakfasted alone in the room behind the grocery. When Ryan's girl came back to clear away, she said Mr. Thaddeus was waiting. Lib stepped into the shop. You wish to speak to me? She asked the man standing there. Good morning, Mrs. Wright. I hope you slept well. A pink, snub-nosed face, a shock of black hair revealed as he lifted his hat. I'm to bring you over to the O'Donnells now, if you're ready. Quite ready. The good doctor thought maybe a trusted friend of the family should make the introductions. Lib was confused. I had the impression Dr. McBrady was such a friend. That he is, said Mr. Thaddeus. But I suppose the O'Donnells repose a special confidence in their priest. A priest? This man was in mufti. I beg your pardon, should it be father? A shrug. Well, that's the new style, but we don't bother our heads much about it in these parts. Right so, sister? He was looking past Lib. She spun around and found the nun hovering. Sister Michael nodded at the priest, and then at Lib, with a twitch of the lips that could have been meant for a smile. The 3 of them turned left down the street through a watery sunlight. Buildings turned different ways, giving each other the cold shoulder. The garish white chapel was the only new-looking building. Mr. Thaddeus cut right just before it, taking a muddy lane that led around a graveyard. Is the O'Donnells' house outside the village? Asked Lib. A little way, said the nun. How many children have they at home? Just the girl now, said Mr. Thaddeus. Have you ever advised her to refuse nourishment? Perhaps as some sort of spiritual exercise? His hand spread in protest. Mrs. Wright, let me assure you that Catholics are required to do without food only for a matter of hours. For instance, from midnight to the taking of the Holy Communion the following morning, but is never to be carried to an extreme, or to the point of harming the health. Then why do you think Anna O'Donnell has gone against the rules of her own church? The priest's broad shoulders heaved into a shrug. She's deaf to all persuasion. What was it about this spoiled miss that she'd managed to enroll all the grown-ups around her in this charade? Here we are, murmured Sister Michael, gesturing towards the end of a faint track. The cabin was in need of a fresh coat of whitewash. Pitched thatch brooded over 3 small squares of glass. At the far end, a cow byre stooped under the same roof. The 3 walked up the path, right past a dung heap, Lib noticed with a quiver of disapproval. There was a half door, gaping at the top like a horse's stall. Mr. Thaddeus pushed the bottom open with a dull scrape and gestured for Lib to go first. She stepped into darkness. A woman cried out in a language Lib didn't know. Her eyes started to adjust. 2 females in frilled caps were clearing away a drying rack that stood before the fire. Piling the clothes into the younger, slighter woman's arms, the elder ran forward to shake hands with the priest. He answered her in the same tongue, Gaelic it had to be, then moved into English. "Rosaleen O'Donnell, I know you met Sister Michael yesterday." "Sister, good morning to you." The woman squeezed the nun's hands. "And this is Mrs. Wright, one of the famous nurses from the Crimea." "My!" Mrs. O'Donnell had broad, bony shoulders, stone grey eyes and a smile hulled with dark. "Heaven bless you for coming such a distance, ma'am. Let you sit down till we have a cup of tea. Chairs are all within, so I've nothing but creepies for you." Creepies had to mean the log stools the woman was shoving practically into the flames for her guests. "And how's Anna today?" asked Mr. Thaddeus. "Well enough in herself, thanks be to God." Lib met Sister Michael's eyes briefly and took the lead. "Until this year, Mrs. O'Donnell, how would you have described your daughter's appetite?" She's never been greedy or clamoured for treats, good as gold." "Has she suffered from disturbances of the stomach?" Mrs. O'Donnell shook her head. "But from 7th of April, 4 months ago yesterday, her 11th birthday, Anna wouldn't take bite nor sup, nothing but God's own water." "Before her birthday, had she eaten anything rancid?" Mrs. O'Donnell bristled. "There'd just be nothing rancid in this kitchen." "And Anna gave no reason for her refusal to eat?" The woman leaned a little closer. "She doesn't need it. She's a living marvel. We're simple people, himself and myself. We can't explain it. But our little girl is thriving by special providence of the Almighty." Mr. Thaddeus's eyes were watchful. "But you and Malachy are willing to let these good nurses sit with Anna for a full fortnight, aren't you, Rosaleen, so they can testify before the committee?" "Willing, and more than willing. So we'll have our characters vindicated. What have we to hide? Haven't we already thrown our doors open to well-wishers from the 4 corners of the earth?" "Speaking of which," said the priest, "I believe your guests may be leaving." 6 people were shuffling out. "Missus, for your trouble." A man in a round hat was offering a coin to Rosaleen O'Donnell. Aha! The root of all evil. The O'Donnells had to be party to this fraud, Lib decided, and for the most predictable of motives, cash. But the mother kept shaking her head. "Put it in the box for the poor, sir, if you must leave it." She nodded at an iron safe set on a creepie by the door. The visitors all slipped their tips into its slot on their way out. Waiting for the crowd to clear, Lib found herself close enough to the mantelpiece to study a murky-toned daguerreotype. Rosaleen O'Donnell, like some imposing totem, a skinny adolescent boy leaning back in her lap, a small girl sitting upright on the father's. Lib squinted through the glare of the glass. Anna O'Donnell had hair about as dark as Lib's own down to her shoulders. Nothing to distinguish her from any other child. "I'd better be looking in on some others of my flock," said the pink-cheeked priest behind her. "Sister Michael's offered to take the first watch, as you must be feeling the effects of your journey." "No," said Lib. "I'm quite ready to begin." "I'm happy to stay with the girl until 9 tonight," Lib told Sister Michael. A long first day would allow her to set up the room and establish the procedures of the watch to her liking. Sister Michael nodded and glided away down the path back towards the village. Lib stepped back inside the house. Anna's bedroom was an unadorned square. A tiny girl in grey sat on a straight-backed chair between the window and the bed, as if listening to some private music. At the creak of the door, she looked up, and a smile split her face. A humbug, Lib reminded herself. The girl stood and held out her hand. Lib shook it. "How are you feeling today, Anna?" "Very well, missus." "Nurse," Lib corrected her, "or Mrs. Wright, or Mom, if you prefer." She reached into her bag for her memorandum book and measuring tape and began making notes. Anna O'Donnell was perfectly obliging. Standing very straight in her plain dress and curiously large boots, she held each position for Lib to measure her. As Lib had expected, the data in her notebook soon indicated that Anna O'Donnell was a false little baggage. Yes, she was thin in places, but not the way a child would be after a month without food, let alone 4. Lib knew what starvation looked like. At Scutari, skeletal refugees had been toted in, bones stretching the skin like tent poles under canvas. "Are you troubled by any pain, Anna?" "No. Dizziness? Maybe the odd time. Step out of your boots for me, please." "They were my brother's," said Anna as she obeyed. "Feet, ankles, and lower legs very swollen," Lib recorded. "How long have your legs been so?" The girl shrugged. Lib glanced through her notes. A few troubling anomalies, yes, but nothing that lent weight to the O'Donnells' grandiose claims of a 4-month fast. Now, where could the child be hiding her food? Lib compressed every seam of Anna's dress and petticoat, feeling for pockets. She checked each part of the girl's body that could possibly hold the tiniest store. Not a crumb. Lib pressed her stethoscope to the left side of the child's chest. Lub-dub, lub-dub. Pulse distinct, she wrote. 89 beats per minute. Lungs healthy. No crackles or wheezes. Despite her odd symptoms, Anna seemed healthier than half her compatriots. Sitting down, Lib put the device on the child's belly. She listened for the least gurgle that would betray the presence of food. Tried another spot. Silence. She percussed the belly lightly. "How does that feel?" "Full," said Anna. Lib stared. Full? Was this defiance? Lib snapped shut her memorandum book. "I'm going to crack you like a nut, Missy." Lib looked around. Until today, it must have been child's play for Anna to sneak food from the kitchen next door in the night, or for any one of the adults to bring it in without the others hearing a thing. "Your maid?" "Kitty," said Anna. "She's our cousin." Lib opened the door and looked through, without leaving the bedroom. "I'd like a basin of hot water and a cloth, please." "Kitty," said Mrs. O'Donnell to the maid, jerking her head. Lib's eyes flicked to the child who was whispering her prayers. She moved to the narrow bed that stood against the wall and began stripping it. The bedstead was wood, and the tick was straw covered in stained canvas. She felt the tick all over for any lumps or gaps in the stitching that might reveal hidey holes. Lib tugged the bedstead away from the wall, so that from now on she'd be able to approach it from 3 sides. Crouching at each corner of the bed in turn, Lib ran her hand under every bar, felt each knob and angle for scraps. She pawed the floor, looking for any patch of beaten earth that might have been gouged up to bury something. Lib inched the dresser away from the wall to make sure there was nothing hollowed out behind it. Tugging out each drawer, she went through the girl's small stock of clothes, fingering every seam and hem. On top of the dresser sat a small wooden chest. She opened it. "Those are my treasures," said the girl, jumping up. "Lovely. May I see?" Lib's hands already busy inside the chest. Pious gimmickry, a set of rosary beads made of seeds, was it? With a plain cross on the end and a painted candlestick in the shape of a virgin and child. She felt the statuette all over to make sure it was porcelain, not something edible. Nothing left in the chest but a few books. She inspected the titles. All devotional. When the door burst open, Lib jumped. "Kitty," with a basin of water. "Sorry to keep you. I'm after bringing himself his meal." Malachi O'Donnell, presumably. "You must be busy," said Lib. "Oh, and could I trouble you for another chair, a jug of water, as well as fresh bedding?" "A sheet?" asked Kitty. "A pair of them, and a clean blanket." The maid shook her head. "We've none." "No clean sheets yet, she means," Anna put in. "Wash day's Monday next, unless 'tis too wet." "I see," said Lib. "Well, just the chair and the water then, Kitty." She made the child's bed again with the same tired sheets and grey blanket. Kitty brought in the chair and thumped it down. "Tell me, where would I find scales to weigh Anna?" Kitty shrugged and went for the jug of water. Lib used the tiny bone spoon to taste it. No hint of any flavour. "Are you thirsty, child?" Anna shook her head. "Hadn't you better take a sip?" The habits of a nurse died hard. Lib reminded herself that it was nothing to her whether the little fraud drank or not, but Anna opened her mouth with a spoon and swallowed without difficulty. "Oh, forgive me that I may be refreshed," she murmured, talking not to Lib, of course, but to God. A soft knock at the door made her leap up. "Malachy O'Donnell, Ma'am." "Mr. O'Donnell," said Lib, putting her hand into his leathery one. He was short and wiry, as lean as his wife. No spare flesh on any of this family. He bent down to kiss his daughter somewhere near the ear. "How are you, pet?" "Very well, Dada," beaming up at him. Malachy O'Donnell stood there nodding. Disappointment weighed on Lib. She'd been expecting the grand showman behind the scenes, or at least a co-conspirator, as prickly as his wife. But this yokel. He stroked his daughter's hairline, headed out, then doubled back and gestured towards the window. "Meant to say that fellow from the paper's here, to take Anna." "Take her where?" snapped Lib. "Take her face, just," said her father. "Her likeness." Rosaline O'Donnell bustled in. "Mr. Riley's ready to do your daguerreotype, Anna." Lib let the child go outside in front of her. Riley ducked under the black drape that covered his camera. He rolled the brass circle off the lens. 1, 2, 3, then flicked it shut. It was a long afternoon back in the bedroom. The girl whispered her prayers and read her books. Lib applied herself to a not uninteresting article on fungus in All the Year Round. At one point, Anna accepted another 2 spoonfuls of water. They sat just a few feet apart, Lib occasionally glancing at the girl over the top of the page. Lib repressed a yawn. "Would you care for a walk?" Anna brightened. "May we really?" In the kitchen, Rosaline O'Donnell and Kitty were skimming cream off pans with saucer-shaped strainers. "Anything you need, pet?" asked Rosaline. "No, thank you, Mammy." "Dinner," Lib said silently. That's what every child needs. Wasn't feeding what defined a mother from the first day on? "We're just stepping out for a walk," Lib told her. Rosaline O'Donnell went back to her work. There were only 2 possible explanations for the Irish woman's serenity, Lib decided. Either Rosaline was so convinced of divine intervention that she had no anxiety for her daughter, or, more likely, she had reason to believe the little girl was getting plenty on the sly. Anna shuffled and clumped along in those boys' boots. When they reached the lane, Lib turned in the direction she hadn't been, away from the village. Anna bent down and tugged up a tall grass, dull purple at the top. "You like flowers, Anna?" "Oh, ever so much, especially lilies. They're Our Lady's favourite." When Anna stood up, she wobbled and drew in a deep breath. Weak from underfeeding? Lib wondered. Just because the fast was a hoax of some sort didn't mean that Anna had been getting all the nourishment a growing girl needed. Perhaps we should turn back. Anna didn't object. Was she tired or just obedient? When they got to the cabin, Kitty asked, "You'll have a bowl of stirabout now, missus?" "Very well," said Lib. When Kitty brought it in, Lib saw that stirabout meant porridge. She realised that this was probably her dinner. 4:15. Country hours. "Take some salt," said Kitty. Lib shook her head. "Go on," said Kitty. "Keeps the little ones off." Lib looked askance at the maid. Was she referring to flies? As soon as Kitty had left the room, Anna whispered, "She means the little people." She formed dances out of her plump hands. "Fairies?" The oatmeal wasn't half bad. Lib had trouble swallowing it in front of the child. Anna busied herself darning a torn petticoat. She didn't ogle Lib's dinner, nor did she avert her gaze as if struggling with temptation. She just kept on forming her neat little stitches. Even if the girl had eaten something last night, Lib thought, she had to be hungry now. After at least 7 hours under the nurse's scrutiny, during which Anna had taken in nothing but 3 teaspoons of water, how could she bear to sit in a room fragrant with warm porridge? Rosaline O'Donnell came in a while later to show off the new photograph. "Mr. Riley's kindly made us a present of this copy. It'll go on the mantel beside poor Pat." Was the O'Donnell boy overseas? Or perhaps Rosaline O'Donnell had said poor Pat because he was a natural, simple-minded. But in that case, how could the O'Donnells have brought themselves to ship the unfortunate abroad? For hours on end, Anna sorted her holy cards. Played with them, really. The tender movements, dreamy air and occasional murmurings reminded Lib of other girls with their dolls. At 8:30, she suggested it might be time for Anna to get undressed. The girl crossed herself and changed into her nightdress. When Anna undid her bun and combed her hair, Masses of dark strands came out on the teeth. That troubled Lib. For a child to be losing her hair like a woman past the prime. She's doing this to herself, Lib reminded herself. It's all part of an elaborate trick that she's playing on the world. Anna made the sign of the cross again as she got into bed. She sat up against the bolster, reading her psalms. Tonight was when the girl would seize her chance. Tonight, when the nun would be there in place of Lib. Was Sister Michael's aging eyes sharp enough? Her wits? Kitty carried in a taper and a stubby brass candlestick. Sister Michael will need more than that, said Lib. I know it's a lot of trouble, but I wonder whether you could get hold of a lamp. I'll see what I can find tomorrow, said Kitty. A stir in the kitchen. Lib put her head out and saw Sister Michael taking off her black cloak. She gave the nun a courteous nod. You'll kneel down with us, won't you, sister? Asked Mrs. O'Donnell. Anna slipped past Lib to kneel between her parents on the earth floor. The nun and the maid were down already, each fingering the little cross at the end of her rosary beads. I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. The 5 voices rattled out the words. Lib could hardly leave now because Sister Michael's eyes were shut. Nobody was keeping a sharp eye on Anna. So Lib sat by the wall with a clear view of the girl. The gabbling changed to the Lord's Prayer, after which the group plunged into a Hail Mary, then another and another. This was ridiculous, but Lib kept her eyes focused on Anna and on the parents. It would only take the briefest meeting of hands for a scrap to be passed over. Lib squinted, making sure nothing touched Anna's red lips. At last, the whole palaver seemed to be over, and Lib was free to go. Good night, Mammy, said Anna. I'll be in to say good night in a minute, said Rosaline. Lib picked up her cloak and bag. I'll see you in the morning, Anna. Her limbs ached from sitting for so long. She really needed to talk to Dr. McBrearty about the unsatisfactory conditions at the cabin, but it was too late to go seeking him out tonight. What had she learned so far? Little or nothing. Mrs. Wright? Here, Lib croaked. 4:15. You asked to be waked. This was the room above the Spirit Grocery in the dead centre of Ireland, so the voice in the crack of the door was Maggie Ryan's. As she dressed, Lib considered that for all the care she had taken yesterday, she hadn't managed to uncover the mechanism of the fraud yet. Sister Michael had been there all night. Would she have solved the puzzle? Lib doubted it, somehow. Well, Lib refused to be gulled by a child of 11. Today she'd have to be even more exact and careful. Dark still. Only a 3/4 moon to light Lib along the village's single street and to the faint path leading to the O'Donnells' farm. 4:45 when she tapped at the door. No answer. Brightness leaked from the door of the byre, off to her right. Ah, the women had to be milking. Lib pushed the front door of the cabin. Firelight blazed in the empty kitchen. Stepping back, Lib almost tripped on something white, a saucer, rim poking out from beneath the dresser. When Lib picked it up, liquid sloshed in her hand, soaking her cuff. Only then did it register. She put her tongue to her wet hand, the tang of milk. So the grand fraud was that simple. A dish of milk was left out for Anna to lap at like a dog in the dark. Lib felt more disappointment than triumph. Exposing this hardly required a trained nurse. It seemed she'd be on her way back to the railway station by the time the sun came up. The door scraped open and Lib jerked around. Mrs. O'Donnell. Good morning to you, Mrs. Wright. Kitty behind her, narrow shoulders dragged down by 2 buckets. Lib held up the saucer. Someone in this household has been secreting milk under the dresser. Rosaline O'Donnell's chapped lips parted in the beginnings of a silent laugh. For the little ones, said Kitty, as if marvelling at the Englishwoman's ignorance. Otherwise wouldn't they take offence? You expect me to believe that this milk is for the fairies? Rosaline O'Donnell folded her big-boned arms. Believe what you like, or believe nothing, ma'am. The bedroom door opened and the nun looked out. How was the night? said Lib. Peaceful, thank God. The nun had disappeared into the bedroom again, leaving the door ajar. Lib was untying her cloak when Malachi O'Donnell stepped in from the farmyard with an armful of turf. He dumped the sods by the fire. Mrs. O'Donnell cut past him and went into their daughter, just as Sister Michael stepped out with her satchel. Lib should have been by the child's side already, to prevent a moment's gap between one nurse's shift and the next. When she got into the bedroom, she found Rosaline O'Donnell sitting on the bed and Anna on her knees beside her mother. There'd been enough time for the child to have gulped down a couple of griddle cakes. Lib cursed the nun for slipping away so fast. She should have given Lib, the more experienced nurse, a report on any pertinent facts on the night shift. Anna's voice was low but clear, not as if she'd just bolted any food. My love is mine, and I am his. In me he dwells, in him I live. That sounded like poetry, but knowing this child, it was scripture. The mother wasn't praying, just nodding along. Mrs. O'Donnell, said Lib, you mustn't be here. Sure, can I say good morning to Anna? Not like this, without one of the nurses present. You mustn't rush into her room ahead of us. You may certainly greet her night and morning. This is for your own good, yours and Mr. O'Donnell's. You wish to prove your innocence of any sleight of hand, don't you? Rosaline O'Donnell sniffed. Breakfast'll be at 9, she threw over her shoulder as she left. The girl unbuttoned her nightdress, slipped it down and tied the sleeves around her middle. A strange disproportion between her narrow chest and bloated belly. She sluiced herself with water from the basin, then dried herself with a cloth, shivering. Lib began her examination of the girl. Today she'd have to ask Dr. McBrearty about those swollen lower legs and hands. Nurse in charge settled into a sort of rhythm on this second day. They read and chatted a little. Several times an hour the child whispered a prayer. Was it meant to strengthen the child's resolve every time emptiness cramped her belly? A knock at the front door shortly after 10. Lib heard a muffled conversation. Then Rosaline O'Donnell tapped on the door of the bedroom and looked past the nurse. More guests for you, pet. 6 of them. Some of them come all the way from America. The big Irish woman's sprightliness sickened Lib. I should have thought it was obvious that such visits must be suspended, Mrs. O'Donnell. Why so? These seem like decent people. Lib met the woman's pebble eyes. My job is to make sure that no one passes the child anything, and that nothing is hidden where she can find it later. Why ever would they do that, when they've come all this way to see the amazing little girl who doesn't eat? Nonetheless. Mrs. O'Donnell's lips set hard. It's too late to turn them away without grave offence. Lib decided to give in until she could speak to Dr. McBrearty. Lose a battle, win the war. Leading Anna into the good room, she took up her position right behind the child's chair. The visitors were a gentleman from the western port of Limerick, with his wife and in-laws, and a mother and daughter of their acquaintance visiting from the United States. One of the gentlemen was interrogating Anna about the date of her last meal. April the 7th, she told him. And how do you believe you've survived this long? I live on manna from heaven, said Anna. Lib shut her eyes briefly so as not to roll them in disbelief, and made a pointed remark about Anna needing to rest. As they left, Lib listened to the coins clink into the money box. Those will be the last visitors admitted, she told the mother in her firmest voice. Rosaline O'Donnell straightened up, shaking out her skirts. Hospitality is a sacred law with the Irish, Mrs. Wright. These people are gawkers, so keen to see your daughter apparently subsist without food, they're willing to pay for the privilege. If the sight moves them to almsgiving, what's wrong with that? Lib held her tongue. She marched into the bedroom behind the girl and examined all the surfaces again, just as she had yesterday. The floor, the treasure box, the dresser, the bedding. Are you cross about the visitors? Asked Anna. Well, they don't have your welfare at heart. Yesterday, Lib had made the mistake of telling the maid she could wait for her dinner. This time she went to the door and she called out that she'd like something to eat. Kitty brought in some fresh cream cheese. The bread, still warm, was too dense with bran for Lib's liking. She was startled when the nun tapped on the door at 1 o'clock. She'd almost forgotten that her shift would end. She stepped close till her face was at the side of the nun's headdress and whispered, I've noted nothing untoward so far. You? A hesitation. Dr. McBrearty was very firm that there should be no sharing of views. I'm not looking for your views, sister, snapped Lib. Only basic facts. Can you assure me that you're keeping a careful note of anything excreted, for instance? Any solids, I mean. There's been nothing of that kind. Lib nodded. I've explained to Mrs. O'Donnell that there's to be no contact without supervision. One embrace at rising, say, and another when going to bed. Also, none of the family are to enter Anna's room when she's not there. The nun was like some undertaker's mute. Lib picked her way along the dirty lane, which was potholed with ovals of blue sky. Last night's rain. Dr. McBrady's house was a substantial one, some way out on the Athlone Road. A maid, as decrepit as her master, showed Lib into the study. McBrady stood up. Good afternoon, Mrs. Wright, how are you? Anything of an urgent nature to report? Not exactly. What worries me most is swelling in her legs. She's resorted to wearing her brother's old boots. Yes, Anna's been dropsical for some time. However, she doesn't complain of pain. Well, she doesn't complain at all. Dr. McBrady plucked at his side whiskers. I could reduce her legs, mechanically, I suppose. No, on the whole, safer to watch and wait. She doesn't look like a child who hasn't eaten in 4 months, does she? Far from it, said Lib. Doctor, if Anna were really taking no nourishment at all, don't you think she'd be prostrated by now? Of course you must have seen many famished patients during the potato blight. McBrady shook his head. As it happens, I was still in Gloucestershire then. Also, said Lib, I can't say I have the utmost confidence in my fellow nurse. It will be no easy task to maintain complete alertness during night shifts in particular. But Sister Michael should be an old hand at that, said Mr. McBrady. She nursed at the Charitable Infirmary in Dublin for 12 years, and at the House of Mercy. They rise for night office at midnight, I believe, and again for lauds at dawn. I see, said Lib, mortified. Well, the real problem is that the conditions at the cabin are most unscientific. Without your authority, Mrs. O'Donnell won't even let me shut the door to oglers, which makes it impossible to watch the child rigorously enough. Could I have it in your hand that there are to be no visitors admitted? Quite yes. McBrady wiped his pen on a cloth and took up a fresh page. The mother may resist turning away the mob, of course, said Lib, on account of the loss of money. Oh, but the donations all go into the poor box that Father Thaddeus gave the O'Donnells. You don't understand these people if you think they'd keep a farthing. He began to write. How do you find Anna otherwise, may I ask? In character? Generally calm. What Miss Nightingale used to describe as the kind of temperament that gathers in impressions gradually. McBrady signed the note, folded it and held it out. Could you have it sent over to the O'Donnells, please, to put a stop to these visits this very afternoon? Oh, certainly. Back at Ryan's, in the tiny dining room, Lib found a red-haired man finishing a chop and filling in a memorandum book much like hers. He jumped to his feet. William Byrne of the Irish Times. Lib accepted his handshake. Mrs. Wright. Touring the sights of the Midlands. He didn't guess why she was there then. He took her for a lady tourist. Are there any? That came out too sardonic. Byrne chuckled. Well, now. It depends how much your soul is stirred by the enigmatic atmosphere of stone circles, ring forts, or round barrows. So all the sights hereabouts are rocky and circular. Apart from the latest one, said William Byrne. A magical girl who lives on air. Lib stiffened. Not what I'd call hard news, but my editor thought it'd do for August. I've been turned away from the girl's humble cot. He must have arrived just after the note she'd made McBrady send. My cold welcome at the Prodigy's cabin is the real catastrophe, complained Byrne. I've shot off a caustic paragraph to the paper already, by telegraph, but now I have to conjure up a full report to send by tonight's mail coach. Maggie Ryan came in with more ale for Byrne. The chops were delicious, he told her. I believe I'll have a chop, said Lib. They're all 8, ma'am. There's mutton. Lib agreed to mutton, not having a choice. Then she pulled out her copy of Adam Bede, so William Byrne wouldn't feel invited to linger. When she reached the cabin at 9 that night, she recognised the moaning chorus of the rosary. She let herself in and waited on a creepy. Like babies, the Catholics, babbling as they squeezed their beads. Afterwards, while the nun was doing up her cloak in the bedroom, Lib asked her about the day. 3 spoonfuls of water taken, according to Sister Michael, and a short walk. It was maddening. What could they be missing? As Sister Michael left the room, the slavey came in with an unshaded lamp and set it down. She struck a match and lit the wick till it flared. "There you go, Mom." "That's a great help, Kitty," said Lib. She sniffed. "Not whale oil. 'Tis burning fluid." "What's that?" "I couldn't tell you." Rosaleen O'Donnell came in. Turning her back on Lib, she bent to wrap the girl in her arms. Lib listened to the whispered endearments and watched Anna's hands dangling at her sides, empty. The woman straightened up. "Let you sleep well tonight, pet." "Good night, Mammy." "Good night, Mrs. O'Donnell," Lib put in, conspicuously civil. Lib opened to a new page and took up a metallic pencil. Tuesday, August 9, 9:27 p.m. Pulse, 93 beats per minute. Lungs, 14 respirations per minute. Tongue, no change. Her first night shift. She made a last pass over the sheets with the flat of her hand, searching for hidden crumbs. Anna was never alone anymore. Not since the watch had begun. Candles, the girl's own clothes, pages out of her books, fragments of her own skin. She had no chance to nibble on any of these things unobserved. It came to Lib then that the question to ask was not how a child might commit such a fraud, but why. The young craved attention, perhaps even fame, but at the price of an empty belly, an aching body. Anna slept, angelic, as all children looked in that rapt state. Lib reminded herself, sleep could make even adults look innocent. Whited sepulchres. Which reminded her of something. The Madonna and Child. She reached past the books in the little chest and took out the candlestick. What might Anna have entrusted to this pastel-painted figurine? Lib shook it. No sound. It was a hollow tube, open at the bottom. Her probing finger felt something she could barely brush with her short nail. A miniature packet? The scissors in her bag. Lib slid the blades down the rough inside of the statuette, digging. A hook was what she needed, really. She gouged harder and hissed as the whole thing cracked in two. China Child broke away from China Mother in her hands. The packet, insubstantial after all that, peeled away from its hiding place. When Lib undid the paper, all she found was a lock of hair, dark, but not red like Anna's. She'd broken one of the child's treasures for nothing. Clumsy novice on her first shift. Lib set the pieces back in the box with the hair packet between them. At 5 a.m, when the nun tapped on the bedroom door, Anna was taking the long, regular breaths that meant the deepest slumber. Lib opened the little chest and pointed to the broken candlestick. "I'm afraid this was knocked over. Could you please pass on my apologies to Anna?" Sister Michael pursed her lips as she fitted mother and child back together. Lib picked up her cloak and bag. On the walk back to the village, her mind was foggy. She was tired. This was Wednesday morning and she hadn't slept since Monday. What was worse, she was being outwitted by a little girl. By 10, Lib was up again. Hard to keep her eyes shut with all the clattering in the grocery below. Mr. Ryan, her red-faced host, was directing a pair of boys as they hauled barrels into his cellar. He said it was too late for any breakfast because didn't his daughter Maggie have the sheets to boil, so Mrs. Wright would just have to wait till noon. Lib sat reading Adam Bede in her room, but her stomach kept growling. Finally, the Angelus bells rang out across the street. Lib checked her watch. 2 minutes past noon. When she went down to the dining room, there was no one else there. The journalist must have gone back to Dublin. When Lib came in that afternoon, the child, alert as ever, was knitting a pair of thick stockings in creamy wool. Lib raised her eyebrows interrogatively at Sister Michael. "Nothing new," murmured the nun. 2 spoons of water." She closed the door behind her on her way out. Anna didn't say a word about the broken candlestick. This afternoon, the tedium was broken by jarring interruptions. Twice there came knocks at the front of the house, and a loud conversation on the doorstep. Then Rosaleen O'Donnell would bustle in to announce that, as per Dr. McBrearty's orders, she'd had to turn away 6 important personages. These good folk had heard of Anna as they passed through Cork or Belfast and come all this way by train and carriage and were being denied even a glimpse of the marvellous little girl. The third time, Lib was ready with a notice, which she suggested the mother paste on the front door. Please refrain from knocking. The O'Donnell family are not to be disturbed. They are grateful to be kept in your thoughts. Rosaleen took it with a barely audible sniff. Anna seemed to pay no attention to any of this as she formed her stitches. She went about her day like any girl, Lib thought. Reading, doing needlework, arranging the visitors' flowers in a tall jug, except that this was Anna's third full day without a meal. It struck Lib that if the strict surveillance was preventing Anna from getting food by her previous methods, the girl might be starting to suffer in earnest. Could the watch be having the perverse effect of turning the O'Donnells' lie to truth? A thought struck her. I don't suppose you have your courses yet, do you? Anna looked blank. Your monthlies. Have you ever bled? Anna's face cleared. A few times, she said. In my mouth. Could a farm child really be so innocent that she didn't know about becoming a woman? Obligingly, Anna had her finger in her mouth. She brought it out tipped with red. Open wide for a minute. Yes, the tissue was spongy, mauve in patches. Anna, I believe you're suffering from a complaint typical of long ocean voyages. It's the effect of poor diet. I'm all right, said Anna. In my educated opinion, you're nothing of the sort. Anna only smiled. The hours passed. Lib read her novel but kept losing track of the plot. Anna drank 2 spoonfuls of water and produced a little urine. I'm very sorry about your candlestick, Lib found herself saying. I shouldn't have been so clumsy or taken it out in the first place. I forgive you, said Anna. The girl lifted the pieces out of the chest, took up the little packet of hair and pushed it back inside the Virgin. Too dark to be her own. A friend's? Or the brother's? A commotion at the front door. A man's voice booming above Rosaleen O'Donnell's. Lib could tell that he was an English gentleman and in a temper. Then the sound of the front door shutting. Half an hour later, the same angry petitioner was back. A minute later, he was stalking into Anna's room, with Rosaleen O'Donnell behind him. A great, domed forehead with long silver locks below. He introduced himself to Lib as Dr. Standish, Chief of Medicine at a Dublin hospital. He's brought a note from Dr. McBrearty, said Rosaleen O'Donnell, waving it, to say we could let in Dr. Standish as a most distinguished visitor. I'm here as a matter of professional courtesy, and I don't appreciate having to chase it backwards and forwards for permission to examine a child. Rosaleen backed out and pulled the door to. Kindly undress her, nurse. The child, stark naked, shuddered on the mat, hands drooping by her sides. Lib looked away as Standish poked and prodded, tapping Anna with his cold instruments. He pressed between her ribs. Does that cause pain? Anna shook her head. But Lib didn't believe her. When did you last move your bowels? I don't remember, whispered Anna. Standish lifted one of her thickened feet to scrape the sole with a fingernail. Finally, he told the child to dress and shoved his instruments back into his bag. As I suspected, a simple case of hysteria. I've had night feeders in my wards before, who won't eat except when no one's watching. Nothing to distinguish this one, except she's been indulged to the extremity of half-starving herself. Half-starving. So Standish believed Anna was sneaking food, but far less than she needed? Or perhaps she'd been getting almost enough until the watch had begun on Monday morning, but since then nothing at all? Lib was horribly afraid he might be right about that. My prescription's very simple, said Standish. A quart of arrowroot in milk 3 times a day. Lib stared at him. She won't take anything by mouth. If a patient of mine refuses a second meal, my nurses have standing orders to use a rubber tube above or below. Lib found herself stepping forward between him and Anna. Only Dr. McBrearty could give such an order with the permission of the parents. It's just as I suspected. In taking up this chit of a girl and dignifying the charade by setting a formal watch, McBrearty's made himself a laughingstock. No, made his whole unfortunate nation a laughingstock. Lib couldn't disagree with that. But such unnecessary harshness, Doctor. Unnecessary? Look at the state of her. Scabby, hairy, and gross with dropsy. The bedroom door banged behind Standish. Lib heard him bark something at the O'Donnells in the kitchen, then march out to his carriage. Lib turned to the girl. This fast is doing you harm. Your body needs nourishment. The girl shook her head. Not earthly food. Anna O'Donnell, you heard what the doctor said. Half starving. You may be doing yourself grievous harm. He's looking wrongly. Lib's hand shook as she pushed open the door of the Spirit Grocery that evening. Her nerves were still jangling from her encounter with Dr. Standish. She had made it almost to the staircase when a figure reared up in the doorway. You didn't tell me who you really were, Nurse Wright. The scribbler. Lib groaned inwardly. Good night, Mr. Byrne. She headed up the stairs. So when may I talk to your charge? I'm simply protecting Anna O'Donnell from the intrusions of the outside world, including, perhaps above all, Grub Street. Byrne stepped closer. I warn you, Mom. I'll camp outside her window. I'll caper like a monkey and pull faces till the child begs for me to be let in. Caper all you like, said Lib. I'll draw the curtain. She went up another 2 steps, then added, Making a nuisance of yourself will earn you and your newspaper nothing but disrepute. I'll answer your questions myself. Will that do? Byrne's light eyes measured her. Very well. Tomorrow afternoon, perhaps. This minute, Nurse Wright. He beckoned her down. My editor will have my hide if I don't send something of substance by the next mail. Lib came back down and sat at the table. So, why all the secrecy? What are you helping the O'Donnells to hide? Said Byrne, uncapping his pen. On the contrary, this watch is being conducted as scrupulously as possible to uncover any deception. Nothing can be allowed to distract us from observing the girl's every move to make sure no food reaches her mouth. He leant back against the settle. Rather a barbaric experiment, no? Let's assume the minx has been getting hold of food on the sly somehow, ever since the spring. But if your watch is so perfect, that means Anna O'Donnell has had nothing to eat for 3 days now. Lib swallowed painfully. That was exactly what she'd begun to fear. This watch is for Anna's own good, she said, to disentangle her from her web of deceit. By famishing her. I must be cruel, only to be kind, said Lib. They'll speak up if she starts to weaken one or both of the parents, the maid, whoever's behind this. Byrne's eyebrows soared. They'll speak up, take the blame, and let themselves be hauled before a judge for fraud. Lib realised she hadn't thought through the criminal side of the matter. She lurched to her feet. I must sleep now, Mr. Byrne. This time he let her go. Back in her room, Lib tried to sleep. Then, sitting up in the dark, it occurred to her for the first time. What if Anna wasn't lying? Did the girl believe her own story? The answer was clear. Conviction shone out of Anna O'Donnell. No enemy, then, this soft-faced child. Only a girl caught up in a sort of waking dream, walking towards the edge of a cliff without knowing it. Only a patient who needed her nurse's help, and fast. 5 a.m., Thursday. Lib entered the bedroom and watched Anna O'Donnell sleep. No change, she murmured to the nun. A shake of the coif-covered head as she left the room. Suddenly the child was awake and looking at her. Good morning, Anna. But Rosaline O'Donnell was hurrying in now to greet her daughter. That broad back like a shield thrown in front of the child, that dark head bent over the smaller one. Doting syllables, Gaelic, no doubt. The whole performance set Lib's teeth on edge. Anna was kneeling beside her mother, hands pressed together, eyes shut. I have sinned exceedingly in thought, word, and deed, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. On each fault, the child's closed fist rapped her chest. Amen, intoned Mrs. O'Donnell. Anna, said Lib, the moment the mother was gone back into the kitchen, should we go out for an early walk? Get dressed and put on your cloak. The moist breeze was delicious as they set off on a faint path between 2 fields. Anna walked slowly, remarking on everything. Sometimes she fancied she could actually glimpse the wind. Full of vitality, Lib thought. How on earth could this child be half starving? No. Someone was still sustaining Anna. That morning, Lib took Anna out for an early morning walk.
"There's Dr. McBrearty,"
said Anna. The old man was scuttling towards them from the cabin.
"Your mother told me I'd find you out taking the air, Anna. Delighted to see you with roses in your cheeks."
She was rather red in the face, but from the exertion of walking, Lib thought, roses was stretching a point. McBrearty turned to Lib.
"Still generally well?"
Miss Nightingale was very stern on the subject of discussing the ill in their hearing.
"You go on ahead of us," Lib suggested.
"Why don't you pick some flowers for your room?" The child obeyed. Lib kept her eyes on her, though. It occurred to her that there might be berries around. Might a hysteric, if that's what Anna was, snatch mouthfuls of food without being conscious of what she did? "I don't know quite how to answer your question," she told the doctor.
"Is her respiration still healthy?"
Lib nodded.
"Sleeping well?"
Another nod.
"She seems cheerful," he said, "and her voice is strong. No vomiting or diarrhea."
"Well, I'd hardly expect that in someone who's not eating." The old man's watery eyes lit up.
"So you believe she's indeed living without?"
Lib interrupted him. "I mean, not taking in enough to lead to any kind of voiding. Anna produces no excrement and very little urine. This suggests to me that she's getting some food, or was until the watch began, more likely, but not sufficient for there to be any waste." Should Lib mention her notion about night feedings to which Anna had been oblivious all these months? She quailed. It suddenly sounded as implausible as any of the old man's own theories. "Don't you think her eyes are beginning to bulge even more?" Lib asked. "Her skin's covered with bruises and crusty patches. Scurvy, perhaps. Or pellagra, even. Certainly she seems anemic." McBrearty gouged the soft grass with his cane. "Are we beginning to stray beyond our remit, Mrs. Wright?"
"Your job is simply to observe."
When they got back to the cabin, the child's hands were blue with cold. Lib brought her over to a high-backed chair beside the hearth and chafed the thick fingers between her own. Lightly, for fear of hurting them. She noticed the empty stool by the door. "I see the strong box is gone."
"We sent it to Mr. Thaddeus by one of Corcoran's boys," said Rosaline O'Donnell. "Every penny gone to aid and comfort the needy. Think of that, Anna. You're storing up riches in heaven."
The mother was the genius behind the plot. Not just one conspirator among others. Lib was almost sure of that. She averted her gaze so her hostility wouldn't show. Anna spread her hands to warm at the fire. On the mantel, inches from Lib's face, the new photograph stood beside the old one of the whole family. The little girl looked much the same in both. The really odd one was the brother. Pat leaned back on his indomitable mother like a much younger child, but his eyes, something wrong with their glitter, the lips dark as if rouged. How to find out more about him? "You must miss your son, Mrs. O'Donnell." A pause, and then,
"I do, of course."
"Is it long since you've heard from him?" Rosaline O'Donnell stared at her.
"He looks down on us. From heaven."
That was Kitty.
"'Twas last November he died. He wasn't 15.
Lib's hand flew up to cover her mouth. "Oh, Mrs. O'Donnell, you must forgive my tactlessness. I didn't realise." Gesturing at the daguerreotype where the boy seemed to watch her with contempt. Or was it mirth? It wasn't taken before his death, she realised, but after. Instead of taking offence, Rosaline O'Donnell was smiling in a gratified way.
"He looks alive to you, Mum." "Well, there's a thing."
Propped up in his mother's lap, blackened lips, the first sign of decomposition. Lib should have read the signs. How long had the O'Donnell boy lain in this kitchen while his family waited for the photographist? Rosaline O'Donnell came up so close that Lib flinched. She tapped the glass. A fine bit of brushwork on his eyes, isn't it? Someone had painted whites and pupils onto the corpse's closed lids in the print.
Lib took Anna by the still cold hand and went back to the bedroom. Her eye fell on the treasure chest. The hair in the statuette she'd broken. That had to be the brother's. "You must feel the loss of your brother," she said.
"I do, of course, but that's not it. Mommy and Daddy think he's in heaven. Only you see, we can't be sure of that. If Pat's in purgatory, he's burning."
"Oh, Anna," said Lib, "you're distressing yourself needlessly. He was only a boy." Anna wailed. "Don't put this in your paper," said Lib over some kind of stew. William Byrne was just finishing his at 1:30 when she came in from her shift. "Go on." Lib decided to take that as a promise. "Anna O'Donnell's mourning her only brother, who died 9 months ago." Byrne nodded and wiped his plate with a crust. Lib was nettled. "You doubt that's enough to cause a mental collapse in a child?" He shrugged. "My whole county could be said to be in mourning, Mrs. Wright. The potato failed in 45 and only really came back in 52. After 7 years of dearth and pestilence, what family was left unbroken?" "What does Anna know of these national questions?" said Lib. "She may feel like the only girl who's ever lost a brother. Perhaps she torments herself with wondering why it was him taken and not her. She seems depressed in her spirits then." "At times," said Lib, "but sometimes quite otherwise, lit up with a secret joy." "Speaking of secrets, you haven't yet caught her trying to get hold of any food on the sly?" Lib hesitated, but she had to try her idea out on someone. "It's occurred to me that one of the household, taking advantage of the child's delusional state, may have been dosing her in her sleep." "Ah, come now. Such a subterfuge would make sense of Anna's conviction that she's not eating. If she's been quite unconscious while someone has been pouring slop down her throat. Possible, but likely?" Lib pushed the remains of her stew aside, unable to finish her meal for once, and got to her feet. "Are you itching to be away?" asked William Byrne. Lib chose to answer that as if he meant the Irish Midlands, not this cramped dining room. "Well, it does sometimes seem as if the 19th century hasn't reached this part of the world yet. Milk for the fairies, girls living on air. Is there nothing the Irish won't swallow?" "Fairies aside," said Byrne, "the majority of my countrymen swallow whatever pap our priests feed us. That's why my money's on Father Thaddeus. The O'Donnell girl may be guileless. She may have even slept through months of night feedings, if you're right. But what of her puppet master?" Why hadn't Lib thought of that? The priest was indeed too glib, too smiling. But wait, proceed logically and fair-mindedly. Mr. Thaddeus claims he's urged Anna to eat from the start. Urged only. She's his parishioner, and a fervently pious one. He could command her to go up a mountain on her knees. No, I say the Padre's been behind the hoax from the start. But with what motive? Byrne rubbed his fingers and thumb together. If Mr. Thaddeus gets Anna's case acknowledged as a miracle, and this dreary hamlet is the site of pilgrimage, there'll be no limit to the profits. The fasting girl's a shrine-building fund. But how could he have managed to feed her secretly by night? No idea, admitted Byrne. He must be in league with the maid, or the O'Donnells. Who do you suspect? She hesitated. Rosaleen O'Donnell. As the last of the evening light drained over the village street, Lib took a right turn down the lane. The notice Lib had made for the cabin door was streaked with rain. Sister Michael was waiting in the bedroom. "Out like a light already," she whispered. "Sister Michael, did you know the child's brother was dead?" The nun nodded, crossing herself. "God rest him." "Anna seems to be fretting over him." Lib hesitated. "I think there's something wrong with Anna's mind." "You're drawing an inference, Mrs. Wright." The nun held up one rigid finger. "We're not to engage in such discussion." "That's impossible." The nun shook her head. "Is she eating or not? That's the only question." "It's not my only question. And if you call yourself a nurse, it can't be yours either." The nun's cheeks tightened. She folded her cloak over her arm and was gone. Sitting watching Anna's eyelids flicker some hours later, Lib found herself longing for the sleep she could have had that afternoon. The body had to be granted something. If not slumber, then stimulus of some sort. Lib set aside her shawl and walked back and forward across the room, 3 paces each way. It struck her now that William Burns' theory about Mr. Thaddeus was audacious and entirely unconvincing. The priest hadn't even been near the cabin since Monday morning. How could she possibly ask Anna? Is it Mr. Thaddeus who's stopping you from eating? What prompted her to look back at the bed? Dark, shiny eyes met hers. How long have you been awake? A little shrug from Anna. Do you need anything? The pot? Water?
No, thank you.
Is anything hurting you?
I don't think so.
What is it? Lib moved closer, hovering over the bed.
Nothing,
breathed Anna. She laid her hand over Anna's on the grey blanket. The swollen fingers were freezing, so she tucked them in. Are you glad to have someone with you at night? The girl looked confused. Not to be alone, I suppose I mean, said Lib.
But I'm not alone. I'm never alone.
No, agreed Lib. 2 jailers, turn and turn about, for constant company.
He comes into me as soon as I'm asleep.
The bluish lids were fluttering shut already, so Lib didn't ask who he was, but she wondered whether the child dreamed of her saviour every night. He comes into me as soon as I'm asleep. A strange construction. Perhaps Anna didn't mean Christ after all, but some ordinary he, a man. Malachi O'Donnell? Mr. Thaddeus, even, who funneled liquid into her mouth when she was in an in-between state of drowsy oblivion. Was Anna trying to tell Lib the truth she barely understood herself? For something to do, Lib looked through the girl's treasure chest, opened the Imitation of Christ carefully so as not to dislodge the holy cards. How many of Anna's most dearly held, mad notions came from these books, or from the bright pastel pictures on the cards? So many plants, sunflowers with faces turned towards the light, or Jesus perched on the canopy of a tree under which people huddled. One card showed the mystic marriage of St. Catherine, but the one that troubled Lib most showed a little girl floating on a raft in the shape of a broad cross, stretched out asleep, unaware of the wild waves rising around her, a sorrowful woman's face in the clouds watching. She closed the book and put it back, then thought to look at the card again to see what passage it was marking. Thou art willing to give me heavenly food and bread of angels to eat. A few pages further on, marked with a picture of the Last Supper, how sweet and pleasant the banquet, when thou gavest thyself to be our food. Or perhaps that card went with, Thou alone art my meat and drink, my love. Lib could see how a child could misread such flowery phrases. Lib felt like shaking the child awake again. Jesus is not actual meat, you dunderhead. No, not a dunderhead. Anna had excellent wits. They'd just gone astray. Almost 5 a.m, by her watch, when Kitty put her head in.
Sister Michael's here.
Thank you, Kitty. But it was Rosaline O'Donnell who came in next. Leave her be, Lib wanted to say, but she held her tongue while Rosaline bent down to rouse her daughter with a long embrace and murmured prayers, like something out of grand opera, the way she barged in to make a show of her maternal feelings twice a day. The nun came in and nodded a greeting, her mouth sealed shut. Lib picked up her things and left. In the good room, sipping tea with a buttered scone on his plate, sat Mr. Thaddeus. Outrage swelled up in Lib, but then he didn't count as a visitor, she told herself, being the parish priest and a member of the committee. And at least Sister Michael was sitting right beside Anna.
My dear child, the priest was saying, purgatory should not be considered an actual place, as much as time allotted for cleansing the soul.
Anna, sitting up very straight, was as pale as milk.
I know 'tis 7 years for every mortal sin, but I don't know how many Pat committed, so I can't do the sum.
The priest sighed. In the eternity of the Almighty's love, there is no time.
But I don't think Pat's in heaven with God yet.
Watching, Lib hurt for the girl. As there'd only been two of them, the siblings must have clung together through the worst of times.
We may pray for those in purgatory, said the priest, to expiate their sins. 'Tis like pouring water on their flames. Oh, but I have, Mr. Thaddeus, said Anna. But that might not be enough water to put out Pat's flames.
Leave Pat to our Heavenly Father, said Mr. Thaddeus. Now, to the matter that's brought me here, your refusal to eat.
I don't refuse, Mr. Thaddeus. I just don't eat.
God sees into your heart, said Mr. Thaddeus, and he's moved by your good intentions. Let's pray that you'll be granted the grace to take food. The three prayed together silently for a few minutes. Then Mr. Thaddeus ate his scone, blessed the O'Donnells and Sister Michael, and took his leave. That afternoon Anna watched the rain, face almost pressed to the smeary window. The skies finally cleared around 6, and Lib took Anna out for a turn around the farmyard, wrapped up well in 2 shawls. When they came back in, a tall bearded man was smoking on a stool in the best chair. He turned to beam at Anna. "You let a stranger in the minute my back was turned?" Lib asked Rosaleen O'Donnell. "Sure, John Flynn's no stranger. He has a fine big farm up the road, and doesn't he often stop in of an evening to bring Malachy the paper?" "No visitors," Lib reminded her. The voice that emerged from the beard was very deep. "I'm a member of the committee that's paying your wages, Mrs. Wright." Wrong-footed again. "I beg your pardon, sir, I didn't realise." "She needs to get out of these damp things," said Lib, and hurried the child towards the bedroom. "So poky and dim in there without the lamp. You may as well put your nightclothes on now." Lib concentrated on Anna's tiny buttons. "What is your name?" said Anna. "Lib." The word came out of her on its own like a cough. "Lib's what I was called." "Lib," said Anna with a satisfied nod. It was sweet to hear it. Like childhood days when Lib's sister still looked up to her, when they thought they'd always have each other. She pushed the memories to arm's length. "What about you? Have you ever had a nickname?" Anna shook her head. "You could be Annie, perhaps. Hannah, Nancy, Nan." "Nan," said the girl. "You like Nan best?" "But she wouldn't be me." Lib shrugged. "A woman can change her name. On marriage, for instance." "You were married, Mrs. Lib." She nodded. "I'm a widow. Sometimes when disaster strikes, there's nothing to be done but begin all over again." The girl absorbed that notion in silence. They were half blinded when Kitty carried in the flaring lamp. Later, Rosaleen O'Donnell came in with the Irish Times that John Flynn had left. Here was the photograph of Anna that Riley had taken on Monday afternoon, but changed into a woodcut. "There's a long piece below." The mother was quivering with gratification. While Anna was brushing her hair, Lib went over to the lamp and skimmed the article. This was William Burns' first dispatch, thrown together on Wednesday morning when he didn't have any solid information. "What does it say about me, Mrs. Lib?" She shook her head. "It's not about you, Anna." Time to get into bed. When the nun came in for her shift, Anna was already dozing. Lib found she had to speak. 5 days and 4 nights, sister, and I've seen nothing. Have you? The nun shook her head. Perhaps because there's been nothing to see. Meaning what? That Anna was indeed a living wonder who thrived on a diet of prayer alone? I have something to say. If by any chance there's been some subterfuge going on in this house over the past months, our surveillance must have put an end to it beginning on Monday. So there's a very real possibility that you and I are the ones preventing Anna from getting nourishment now. The nun shook her head over and over. I hope I'm wrong, but what do we do? What we were hired to do, Mrs. Wright. No more, no less. And with that, the nun sat down and opened her holy book like a barricade. Lib shoved the door open and went out into the night. When she reached the cabin next morning, Sister Michael was by the bedside. Lib's eyebrows lifted in a silent question. The nun shook her head. How much water has she taken?
3 spoons.
Not that it mattered, it was only water. The nun collected her things and went out as Rosaleen O'Donnell came in from the kitchen, and Anna blinked awake. Lib moved away to the dresser to allow the morning greeting, but as Rosaleen leaned over to engulf the child in her usual embrace, Anna put her hand up flat against the woman's expanse of bony chest. Rosaleen O'Donnell froze. Anna shook her head, wordless. Rosaleen O'Donnell straightened up. On the way out, she gave Lib a venomous look. Lib felt shaken. Was it her fault if the girl had finally had enough of being fawned over by her hypocrite of a mother? Refused mother's greeting, Lib noted down in her memorandum book. On her way back to the village that afternoon, Lib pushed open the rusty gate of the cemetery. She was curious to see Pat O'Donnell's grave. Eventually she found the boy. Patrick Mary O'Donnell, 3rd of December, 1843, to 21st of November, 1858. Asleep in Jesus. A breeze cut through the churchyard, and Lib wrapped her cloak around her. By the time she reached the village, the sun was out again and everything sparkled. The metallic clattering of a horse behind her. Only as the rider caught up to Lib did she recognise the broad shoulders and rusty curls. She nodded, expecting William Byrne to touch his hat and canter on, but Burns slid out of the saddle. "Mrs. Wright, what a pleasure to run into you," Lib said. "You must be missing the more urbane pleasures of Dublin. Have you family there?"
"My parents, 3 brothers," said Byrne.
That wasn't what Lib had meant, but she supposed she had her answer. The man was a bachelor. "The fact is, Mrs. Wright, I work like a dog. I'm Irish correspondent for a number of English papers, and in addition I churn out stern unionism for the Dublin Daily Express, Fenian fervour for the Nation, Catholic pieties for the Freeman's Journal, and for the Irish Times, moderate views on matters of general interest. Then, in spare moments, of course, I study for the bar. Tell me, do you ever bring your young charge out for a walk?" Lib gave him a repressive look. A quiet between the two of them as they walked. The horse paused to nibble a leaf. "Are you a man of belief?" asked Lib. A shockingly personal question, but she felt as if they were past trivialities. Byrne nodded. "Somehow all the miseries I've seen haven't quite shaken that out of me. And you, Mrs. Wright, quite godless." "I believe in what I can see," said Lib. "Trial and error. Science. It's all we can rely on. At Scutari I found myself thinking, if the Creator can't prevent such abominations, what good is he?" The only sounds, the tread of their boots on the dried mud, and the soft clopping of the horses' hooves. "Haven't people in all times and places cried out to their Maker?" asked Byrne. "Which only proves we wish for one," muttered Lib. "Doesn't the very intensity of that longing make it all the more likely that it's only a dream?" "What about our dead?" asked Byrne. Memory seized Lib like a cramp. The weight in her arms, sweet pale flesh, still warm, not moving. Blinded by tears, she stumbled forward, trying to escape him. Byrne caught up to her and took her by one elbow. She couldn't explain herself. She bit down on her lips and tasted blood. "I'm so very sorry," he said, as if he understood. Of all people to whom she shouldn't blab, a reporter, yet who else in the world would understand? "I've watched the girl until my eyes hurt. She doesn't eat, yet she's alive. More alive than anyone I know. I just don't know what to make of her." "Then let me try," he said. "Consider me a fresh pair of eyes. Perhaps I can tease some truth out of the girl." Eyes down, she shook her head. She was under no obligation to exchange another word with this provocateur. She spun around and strode back in the direction of the village. When Lib arrived that evening, she found Malachy and Kitty alone in the cabin. "Is your mistress out?" Lib asked her. "'Tis her female sodality on Saturdays," said Kitty. "Kitty, do you by any chance remember the last food your cousin ate before her birthday?" "I do, of course. The host. Her very first Holy Communion, bless the girl. 'Twas no earthly food she wanted for her last meal," Malachy murmured, eyes on the fire. So Anna had taken the host for the first and only time, then shut her mouth. The father's face hung, uneven in the flicker of the flames. Some adult had been keeping Anna alive all these months, Lib reminded herself. Could it have been Malachi? On Sunday morning, Lib should have been catching up on her sleep, but the clanging church bells made that impossible. When she got to the cabin at 1 o'clock, the nun reported that the girl had been distressed at not being allowed to go to Mass, but had agreed to recite the liturgy for the day with Sister Michael instead. For their walk, Lib set a very slow pace this time, so as not to overtire Anna. She scanned the horizon before they set out, to make sure there were no gawkers nearby. They picked their way across the farmyard, their boots slithering. Anna stopped to stroke a vivid cushion of moss on a wall. A pair of birds picked at red currants in the hedge. Lib pulled a bunch of the gleaming globes and held them up close to the child's face. "Do you remember the taste of these?" "I think so." Anna's lips were just a hand span from the currants. Anna picked one small red ball from the bunch. Lib's heart thudded loud enough to hear. Was this the moment? As easy as that? But the girl held out her palm quite flat, with a currant in the middle, and waited till the bravest of the birds dived for it. Lib was so tired, stumbling back to the spirit grocery after 9 on Sunday evening. She felt sure she'd sleep as soon as her head touched the pillow. Instead, her mind sprang to life like a buzzing hornet. It weighed on her that she might have misjudged William Byrne yesterday afternoon. What had he done but ask, one more time, for an interview with Anna? His room was just across the passage, but he probably hadn't gone to bed yet. Lib wished she could talk to him. The fact was, she was getting desperate for someone else's opinion of the girl. Someone whose mind Lib trusted. Someone who could tell Lib if she was losing her grip on reality. "Let me try," Byrne said again in her head. Two things could be true at once. He was a journalist, paid to dig up the story, but might he not also truly want to help? 1 week exactly since Lib had arrived from London, so full of confidence she'd been. Misplaced confidence in her own acuity, it had turned out. She'd thought to be back at the hospital by now. Instead, she was trapped here, in these same greasy-feeling sheets, no nearer to understanding Anna O'Donnell than she'd been a week ago. Only more muddled, and more exhausted, and more troubled by her own part in these events. Before dawn on Monday morning, Lib slid a note under Byrne's door. When she arrived at the cabin precisely at 5, the child was still sleeping under 3 blankets. "Good morning," whispered Sister Michael, showing Lib the bare record of the night. Sponge bath given, 2 teaspoonfuls of water taken. When Sister Michael had left, Lib leaned over the bed. "Are you well, child?" "More than well, Mrs. Lib. 'Tis the feast of Our Lady's Assumption." The O'Donnells and Kitty came in early to tell Anna that they were off to the chapel. Lib didn't take the girl out till 10 o'clock this morning. It was a beautiful day. She tucked the child's arm in hers and set a very cautious pace. Anna was moving in what struck Lib as an odd way, with her chin stuck out, but the girl snuffed at the air as if it were a tar of roses instead of cows and chickens, stroked every mossy rock that they passed. A black-jacketed silhouette at the end of the path, out of sight of the cabin. William Byrne. He lifted his hat. "Mrs. Wright?" "Ah, I believe I know this gentleman," said Lib. The committee could dismiss her for arranging this interview if any of its members got to hear about it. "Mr. Byrne, this is Anna O'Donnell." "Good morning, Anna." He shook her hand. Lib saw him eyeing the bloated fingers. She steered Byrne and Anna away from the village and took a cart track that looked little used. "Is Mr. Byrne a visitor, Mrs. Lib?" She shook her head. Visitors were forbidden. She couldn't have Anna reporting to her parents that the nurse had broken her own rule. I'm in these parts just for a little while, to see the sights, said Byrne. He found out that Anna loved flowers, which was a great coincidence, he told her, because he did too. He broke off a red stem of dogwood with one last white bloom and gave it to her. Lib was glad she'd risked this after all. He was getting a sense of the real girl. He tested Anna on bird songs next. She correctly identified the melodic sobbing of a curlew and a drumming made by the wings of what she called a bog bleater, which turned out to be an Irishism for snipe. Finally, Anna admitted that she was a little tired.
Would you like a little rest here to fortify you for the way back?
Asked Byrne.
Yes, please.
He spread his coat out on a large flat rock for the child. Anna subsided on it. I'll have my eye on you all the time, Lib promised. She and Byrne drifted away till they reached a broken wall. Well, what do you make of her?
She's delightful. A delightful dying child.
Lib was winded.
Are you blind? Said Mr. Byrne. The girl's wasting away in front of you. I suppose you're too close up to see it.
How can you? What makes you so sure? I was sent to study famine when I was only 5 years older than her. That waddle, the ghastly fuzz on her face, and have you smelled her breath lately? It goes vinegary as the body turns on itself, eating itself up, I suppose. Lib looked over and saw that the child had crumpled like a leaf. She ran.
I didn't faint,
Anna kept insisting as William Byrne carried her home, eyes looking as deep as bog holes. Lib's throat was constricted with fright. A delightful dying child. He was right. Damn the man. Let me in, Byrne told Lib outside the cabin. You can tell the parents I happened to be passing and came to your aid. Get away from here. She wrenched Anna out of his arms. When Lib woke, that Monday afternoon, a rectangle of white at the base of the door confused her eye. Only when she dragged herself out of bed did it turn into a page, handwritten, hastily but without mistakes. Anna O'Donnell is an exceptional maiden. She speaks with sweetness, composure, and candour. She displays great feeling for nature, but the lurching walk and strained posture, the sunken eyes, and above all the sharp-scented breath, known as the odour of famine, all testify to her state of malnutrition. Whatever devices may have been used to keep Anna O'Donnell alive, over the 4 months since her parents claimed she left off eating, until the watch commenced on the 8th of August, it must be said that the child is now in grave peril, and that her watchers must beware. Lib balled up the page so tightly it disappeared in her fist. How it bit, every word of it. At 9 on Tuesday morning, Lib went to McBrady's house. Dr. McBrady was in his study, moving papers about in a desultory way. Mrs. Wright, how good of you to come. Doctor, I'm here out of grave concern for Anna's welfare. Oh dear. She fainted yesterday, said Lib. She's failing fast, which means she must have been getting food until we thwarted it. We're to blame. You must call off the watch and bend all your efforts to persuading her to eat. Your protectiveness is only natural, said McBrady. I suppose the duties of a nurse, especially with a patient so young, must stimulate the maternal capacity. Your own infant didn't live, I understand. Lib looked away, so he couldn't read her face. Had Matron really been obligated to share Lib's history with the man? But you mustn't allow your personal loss to distort your judgment. I'll pop in again this very afternoon. Will that set your mind at rest? At 1 o'clock she found Anna in bed.
She needed a wee nap after we went round the yard,
murmured Sister Michael, fastening her cloak. This was the first time the child had taken to her bed in the middle of the day. Dinner at 4 was some kind of fish stew. Lib was wiping her plate with oat bread when Dr. McBrady bustled in. Anna struggled up.
Good day, Doctor.
Well, Anna, you've a good colour on you this afternoon. Could the old man really be mistaking that hectic flush for health?
And you know what I brought you, child? A bath chair on wheels, so you can take the air without overtiring yourself.
Thank you, Doctor. As he took his leave, Lib followed him to just outside the bedroom door. I see no real imminent risk, he said. She's already bedridden. A few days' rest should do her the world of good. I wouldn't be surprised if she rallied by the end of the week. Sir McBrady was twice the idiot she had thought him. "Doctor," said Lib, "if you won't call off this watch, if I were to propose that we abort the watch on the grounds that it's jeopardising the child's health by preventing some secret method of feeding, it would be tantamount to a declaration that my old friends, the O'Donnells, are vile cheats." By rights, Lib should have been packing her bag. If she believed this watch to be indefensible, she should have no further part in it. But she couldn't leave. At 10:30 that Tuesday night, Lib tiptoed across the passage and tapped on William Burns' door. The door was flung open. William Byrne, wild-haired and in his shirt sleeves. "I owe you an apology," said Lib. "You're entirely right about Anna's state. I've spoken to Sister Michael, but she won't take a single step without the express permission of her masters. I've urged Dr. McBrady to halt the watch, but he accused me of irrational panic. Thoroughly rational, I'd call it." Burns' calm voice made Lib feel slightly better. How necessary this man's conversation had become to her, and so quickly. "Have you ever put it to Anna, fair and square, that she must eat?" Lib struggled to remember. "I've certainly raised the issue, but on the whole I've tried to remain objective, neutral." "The time for neutrality's past," said Byrne. Footsteps on the stairs, someone coming up. Lib fled into her room. If Maggie Ryan had caught the English nurse talking to the journalist so late at night, what would she have thought? And would she have been wrong? On Wednesday morning, Lib got to the cabin before 5. She found Anna sunk in sleep. Sister Michael left without a word. In the night, Lib had decided on her tactics. She'd choose the weapon most likely to shake the girl. Holy Writ. She took the whole stack of Anna's pious volumes into her lap now and started skimming them, marking passages with strips torn out of the back page of her memorandum book. When the girl woke a little later, Lib dressed her and wrapped her in 2 shawls to stop her shivering. Then she drew her chair very close to the bed. Time for battle. "Anna, you've convinced yourself that God has chosen you, out of all the people in the world, not to eat. But these holy books of yours, they're full of instructions to the contrary." Lib opened one and found the line she'd marked. "Look upon your meat and drink as medicines, necessary for your health." Or here, in the Psalms, she flipped to the right page. "I am smitten as grass, and my heart is withered, because I forgot to eat my bread." And what about the line I hear you say all the time? "Give us this day our daily bread." "Not actual bread," muttered Anna. "It's actual bread that an actual child needs," Lib told her. "Jesus shared the loaves and the fishes with the 5,000, didn't he? He didn't say, 'Ignore your stomachs and keep listening while I preach.' He gave them dinner. At the Last Supper, he broke bread with his followers, didn't he? What did he tell them? His exact words?" "Take ye and eat," said Anna. "But once he'd consecrated it, the bread wasn't bread anymore. It was him, like manna. For months I was fed manna from heaven." "Could I speak to you in the kitchen, Mrs. Wright?" Rosaleen O'Donnell in the doorway, long arms akimbo. Lib stood up. She'd be breaking the rule about leaving Anna alone in the room. But what did it matter now? She shut the door behind her so Anna wouldn't hear a word. Rosaleen O'Donnell brandished a newspaper. "John Flynn got hold of this in Mullingar this morning." Lib's eyes immediately picked out Burns' article reporting on Anna's decline. "How did this blackguard come to have a chance encounter with my child, may I ask? And where did he get this nonsense about her being in grave danger?" "What would you call it, Mrs. O'Donnell? Have you looked at your daughter lately?" "Oh, 'tis you who knows better than the girl's own physician, is it? You, who couldn't even tell a dead child from a living one?" Rosaleen gestured at the photograph on the mantel. That stung. "If you hadn't been appointed by the committee, I'd have you out of my house this minute." "What, so that Anna can die all the faster? What kind of mother would let it come to this?" Rosaleen O'Donnell did the last thing Lib was expecting. Burst into tears. "Didn't I try my best? Didn't I bring her into the world and rear her tenderly and feed her as long as she'd let me?" For a moment, Lib glimpsed how it must have been. That day in spring when the O'Donnells' good little girl, with no warning or explanation, had refused to eat another bite. "Mrs. O'Donnell," she began, Let me assure you. But the woman fled. Lib went back to the bedroom, shaking. It confused her to feel such sympathy for a woman she loathed. For months I was fed on manna from heaven. That's what she'd said this morning. Unless Lib had heard it wrong. Not 4. 4 months. Was that it? 4 months I was fed on manna from heaven. Until the arrival of the nurses. But no, because then she should have begun to show the effects a couple of days later. Could a child really have gone 7 days before flagging? Lib flicked back through her memorandum book now. Every day during the first week had been much the same until refused mother's greeting. She stared at the words. Saturday morning, 6 days into the watch. How could she have been so blind? Not just a greeting twice a day, an embrace in which the big bony woman's frame had blocked the child from view. Lib shook the girl awake. When you were fed on manna, who brought it to you? She was expecting resistance, denial, some elaborate cover story about angels.
Mammy,
murmured Anna. Had the girl always been ready to answer so candidly the moment she was asked? She remembered the way Rosaleen O'Donnell had sidled in for the permitted embrace morning and evening, smiling but oddly silent. Yes, Rosaleen always kept her mouth shut tight until after she'd bent down to wrap her whole body around Anna and kissed her like a great bird feeding her nestling. She told you it was from heaven. Anna looked confused by the question.
That's what manna is.
Does anyone else know, Kitty? Your father?
I don't think so. I've never spoken of it. It's private.
A secret exchange, too sacred to be put into words. Yes, Lib could imagine a woman of strong character persuading her little girl of that. But you don't take the manna anymore, do you? Not since Saturday.
I don't need it.
Didn't I feed her as long as she'd let me, was what Rosaleen had wailed. Lib had heard the woman's grief and remorse, but still not understood. The mother had set Anna up on a pedestal to shine like a beacon to the world. She'd had every intention of keeping her daughter alive indefinitely through this covert supply of food. It was Anna who'd put an end to it, 1 week into the watch. Thursday came scorching, the August sky a terrible blue. When William Byrne walked into the dining room at noon, Lib was alone, staring into her soup. She looked up and tried to smile at him. "How's Anna?" he asked, sitting down across from her, his knees against her skirt. Lib pushed away her bowl. Watching the door for the Ryan girl, she explained about the manna from heaven delivered under cover of an embrace. "The audacity of the woman," he said. "But for the past 5 days, Anna has refused to take the manna, and her mother hasn't said a word. I suppose she doesn't know how to speak up without condemning herself." A qualm struck Lib. "You can't publish any of this, not yet." "Why not? For Anna's sake, the hoax should be shouted to the 4 winds. A public scandal won't make her eat. She seems to welcome the prospect of death. But why?" "I don't know," said Lib, "except that she misses her brother." "Have you told the nun about the manna yet?" "I've told no one but you." Byrne looked up at Lib in a way that made her wish she hadn't blurted that out. "Well, I say you should share your discovery with the whole committee tonight. At 10 o'clock they're gathering here in the back room at the doctor's behest." By the time Lib reached the cabin that afternoon, she decided she had to go to this meeting tonight, invited or not. In the bedroom, the child lay curled up, facing the window, ribs rising and falling. The nun's face was drawn. "Worse," she mouthed, as she gathered her cloak and bag. Lib put a hand on her arm to stop her from leaving. "Anna confessed," she said. "Until last Saturday, the mother was feeding her chewed-up food, under cover of kisses, and convincing the girl that it was manna." Sister Michael blanched and crossed herself. "I should have seen," she said. "The committee will be at Ryan's at 10 this evening," said Lib. And we must speak to them. We must make our report to the committee. I'll do the talking, but you must stand with me." The smoothly wimpled head kept swinging like a bell. "Those aren't our orders." The nun fled from the room. All the heat of the day couldn't stop Anna's shivers. Nothing to do but call for more hot bricks. Kitty's eyes were rimmed with scarlet a quarter of an hour later when she brought 4 bricks in and tucked them under Anna's blankets. The child was deep in slumber now. "Kitty," said Lib, "your cousin's dying." Water brimmed in Kitty's eyes. "All God's children need to eat," said Lib. "Until a few days ago, Anna's been kept alive by means of a wicked trick. Your mistress, Mrs. O'Donnell, has been feeding the child from her own mouth, pretending to kiss her, you see. In her innocence, Anna thought she was receiving holy manna from heaven." A pair of hard hands seized her by the face, clamped over her mouth. "Shut your lying gob. Like a sickness you came into this house, spreading your poison. Godless, heartless, have you no shame?" The door banged behind her. "You tried," Lib reminded herself. She threw out some shrunken flowers and tidied the missal back into its box. Then on an impulse she took it out again and leafed through it once more, looking for the prayer that Anna recited 33 times a day. Here. The title was "The Good Friday Prayer for the Holy Souls as Revealed to St. Bridget." The text told Lib nothing new. She squinted at the notes in minute print below. If said 33 times fasting on a Friday, 3 souls will be released from purgatory. But if on Good Friday, the harvest will be 33 souls. Lib was about to shut the book when she belatedly registered one word. Fasting. If said 33 times fasting. She bent and touched the girl's cheek. "Anna." The child blinked up at Lib. "Your prayer, 'I adore thee, O most precious cross,' is that why you won't eat?" Anna's smile was the oddest thing, joyful with a dark edge. "You're trying to get your brother into heaven." Anna nodded.
"If I say the prayer, fasting, 33 times every day."
"Anna, to say it fasting, I'm sure that means skipping only 1 meal on 1 Friday to save 3 souls, or 33 if it's Good Friday. The book never says to stop eating entirely." Anna's eyes glistened.
"Souls need a lot of cleaning. I just keep saying the prayer and begging him to fetch Pat into heaven. Maybe he'll have mercy, and on me too even. Then Pat and I can be together again."
"Live first. Pat will wait."
"He's waited 9 months already. Burning."
Anna let out a sob. It occurred to Lib that she was the only one in the world who knew for sure that this child meant to die. At 8 that evening, when Malachy O'Donnell came in to say goodnight, Anna was fast asleep. With a great effort, Lib roused herself. "I must tell you, Mr. O'Donnell, your daughter doesn't have long left." Terror glinted in his eyes. The doctor said, "He's wrong. Her lungs are filling up with fluid." "The creature." He stared down at the small body outlined by the blankets. It was on the tip of Lib's tongue now, to blurt out the whole story of the manor. But it was a grave thing to come between man and wife, and risky, because how could Malachy possibly take the Englishwoman's word against Rosaline's? After all, Lib had no hard evidence. No, what mattered was not the truth, but Anna. Wake the protective father in him. "Anna means to die," she said, "in hopes of getting your son out of purgatory." "What?" "As a sort of exchange, a sacrifice." "God save us," muttered Malachy. "When she wakes, won't you tell her she's wrong?" "Sure, there's no telling Anna." "Well, you're going to lose her if you don't act fast. Be firm with her, be her father." "Only her earthly one," said Malachy. He jerked his head towards the sky. "He's the only one she'll hear." Lib waited in her upstairs room at Ryan's, belly clenched. She checked her watch. 10:15, the committee should be gathered by now. Standing up, she neatened her grey uniform and smoothened down her hair. Behind the grocery shop, she waited outside the meeting room until she recognised some of the voices, the doctors and the priests. Then she tapped at the door. When Lib let herself in, the first person she saw was Rosaline O'Donnell, Their eyes locked. Malachi behind his wife. A short, long-nosed man in old brocade was in the big chair with a carved back, presiding over a table improvised from 3 trestles. The chairman, Sir Otway Blackett, she guessed. She recognised the Irish Times on the table. Were they discussing Burns' piece? "And this is?" inquired Sir Otway. "The English nurse, come without being asked," said Big John Flynn in the next chair along. "This is a private meeting, Mrs. Wright," said Dr. McBrearty. Lib looked from face to face, refusing to be cowed. "Gentlemen, excuse me. I thought you should hear the very latest news of Anna O'Donnell's health." "I've already given my report, Mrs. Wright," said Dr. McBrearty. She turned on him. "Have you told the committee that Anna's so swollen up with dropsy she can no longer walk? She's faint and freezing. Her pulse is higher every hour, and her lungs crackle because she's beginning to drown from within. Her skin's covered in crusts and bruises, and her hair comes out in handfuls like an old—" Sir Otway was holding up one palm to stop her. "We take your point, ma'am." "I've always said this whole thing's a nonsense." It was Ryan, the publican, who broke the leaden silence. "Who can live without food?" John Flynn turned to him. "Hold your tongue." "Surely we need not stoop to squabbling," said the priest. Lib took a step towards him. "Mr. Thaddeus, I've discovered that Anna's starving herself in the demented hope of saving her brother's soul, apparently with the blessing of her parents." Lib flung an arm towards the O'Donnells. "You represent Rome in this village, Mr. Thaddeus," said Lib. "Then why don't you command Anna to eat?" The man bristled. "The relationship between priest and parishioner is a holy one, ma'am, that you're in no way qualified to understand. If Anna won't listen to you, can't you call in a bishop?" His eyes bulged. "I won't. Mustn't entangle my superiors, the church as a whole in this case." "What do you mean entangled?" demanded Flynn. "Won't it be to the church's glory when Anna's proved to be living by spiritual means only? Couldn't this little Irish girl be Ireland's first saint canonised since the 13th century? A creak. The door of the room flapped open and Sister Michael backed in, pulling the wheeled chair with her. The tiny girl lay at an odd angle, but her eyes were open. "Daddy," she murmured. "Mammy, Mrs. Lib, Mr. Thaddeus." "Child," said Mr. Thaddeus, "we hear you're under the weather." This was Irish euphemism at its worst. "I'm very well," said Anna. Lib knew all at once that she couldn't tell them about the manor. Not here, not now. Because it was only hearsay, after all, a second-hand reporting of the word of a child. Rosaleen O'Donnell would shriek that the Englishwoman had made up the whole blasphemous story out of spite. The members of the committee would turn to Anna and demand to know whether it was true, and what then? For Lib to force the girl to choose between her and Rosaleen was too risky. What child wouldn't side with her own mother? Changing tack, she walked towards the wheeled chair. "Good evening, Anna. May I take off your blanket so these gentlemen can see you better?" A tiny nod. Lib unveiled the child, then pushed the chair up close to the table so the committee could see her in all her grotesque disproportion. "Gentlemen," she said, "my fellow nurse and I have found ourselves overseeing the slow execution of a child. I beg that the watch be called off tonight, and all efforts bent to saving Anna's life." For a long moment, not a word. Lib watched McBrearty. His papery lips quivered. "We've seen enough, I believe," said Sir Otway Blackett. "Yes, you may take Anna home now, sister," said McBrearty. Meek as ever, the nun nodded and wheeled the chair out. "And you may leave us, Mr. and Mrs. O'Donnell." Rosaleen looked mutinous, but went out with Malachi. "And Mrs. Wright?" Mr. Thaddeus gestured for her to go as well. "Not till this meeting's over," said Lib. "I'm sure we all concur," said the baronet, "on the necessity of being quite certain before deviating from our agreed course of action and curtailing the watch." Hemming and hawing across the table. "After all, the watch is the only way to find out the truth for once and for all," said McBrearty. Lib couldn't bear any more. She pointed at the doctor. "You'll be struck off the medical register. As for the rest of you, your negligence could be considered criminal. Failure to provide the necessities of life to a child," she said. improvising as she moved her accusing finger from one man to the next. Conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Complicity in a suicide. "Ma'am," barked the baronet, "may I remind you that you have been employed for an agreed period of a fortnight. Your testimony as to whether you've observed the girl take any nourishment will be required of you on Sunday." Lib turned on him. "Anna will be dead by Sunday." A scratching at her door, upstairs at Ryan's. Lib clambered out of bed, fumbled for her dressing gown, opened the door a crack. "Mr. Byrne." He didn't apologise for disturbing her. Lib shot a look at the dark hollow of the staircase. Someone could come up at any time. She beckoned him into her room. Byrne stepped in without hesitation. "I heard about the meeting," he began, "from Maggie Ryan. She caught only the odd snatch of what was said, but her sense of it was that they all came down on you like a wolf pack." Lib almost laughed. Then she told him everything. From Anna's perverse hope to expiate her brother's sins, to the committee and their pig-headed refusal to deviate from their plan. "Forget them," said Byrne. "I doubt if any of them can talk the girl out of her madness now. But you, she likes you. You have influence. How far will you go to save her?" Only when he asked it did she find she knew the answer. "I'll stop at nothing." One eyebrow went up, sceptical. "I'm not what you think me, Mr. Byrne, a prudish widow. The truth is, I'm not a widow at all." The words came out of Lib's mouth with no warning. That made the Irishman sit up straight. "No, Wright didn't die," said Lib. "He took his leave." "Why?" Lib shrugged. She could have told him about the baby, but she didn't want to. Not now. "Whatever could possess a man to leave you?" he asked. William Byrne kissed her, so fast and so hard that she almost tipped over. Not a word. Only that single kiss, and he walked out of her room. Strangely enough, Lib did sleep then, despite all the clamour in her head. When she woke, she fumbled for her watch on the table. 4 o'clock, Friday morning. Only then did she remember how Byrne had kissed her. No, how the two of them had kissed. Had Anna worsened in the night? She longed to be back in that small, airless room. Would the O'Donnells even let her in this morning, after what she'd said at the meeting? When she arrived, Malachi O'Donnell was drinking tea by the fire. Rosaline and Kitty were scraping something from one pot into another. The slavey kept her head down. The mistress glanced Lib's way, but only briefly. So the O'Donnells weren't going to defy the committee by barring Lib from the cabin, at least not today. In the bedroom, Anna was so deeply asleep that she looked like a waxwork. Lib took Sister Michael's cool hand and squeezed it. "Thank you for coming last night." "But it did no good, did it?" asked Sister Michael. Anna was aging as if time itself was speeding up. Her skin was wrinkled parchment, blemished as if messages had been inked on it, then scratched out. "Use your influence," Byrne had said, but what new arguments could Lib muster? "Anna," she said, "you've done enough." The child blinked at her. "Fasted enough, prayed enough. I'm sure Pat is happy in heaven already." A whisper. "Can't be sure." Kitty from the doorway. "'Tis Mr. Thaddeus." Lib leapt to her feet. The priest looked uncomfortably hot in his layers of black, the O'Donnells hovering behind him. "Do you wish to make your confession, child?" he asked Anna. "Not now." Rosaline O'Donnell knotted her fingers. "Sure, what sins would you be after committing? Lying there like a cherub." In her head, Lib said, "You're afraid of her telling the priest about the manna. Monster." "Will we have a hymn then?" asked Mr. Thaddeus. Kitty had sidled in too. They sang their hymn and Mr. Thaddeus bent over the bed. "Bless you, my child. I'll look in again tomorrow." Was that the best he could do? A hymn and a blessing? All afternoon, Lib lay on top of her bed at Ryan's. Sleep was a distant country. "I'll stop at nothing," Lib had boasted to Byrne last night. But what could she do to save a child who refused to be rescued? At 7, she went downstairs and had some dinner. By the time Lib reached the cabin, the dark horizon was swallowing up the sun. Anna was weirdly yellowish against the dull sheets. "The doctor confirmed it was jaundice when he looked in this afternoon," murmured the nun as she fastened her cloak. Lib turned to Rosaleen O'Donnell standing in the doorway.
"Anna, Mr. Thaddeus is offering a special mass tomorrow evening at 8:30 because of you not being well, and everyone will be there."
"Lovely," breathed Anna. Lib waited for the other 2 women to leave. She sat down and took Anna's scaly hand. A rattling breath.
"I just wish I knew how long it'll take."
"Dying, you mean?" The girl nodded.
"Are you afraid?"
A tiny nod. "I don't believe you truly want to die." Such misery in the child's face. Anna had never let this show before.
"Thy will be done,"
she whispered, crossing herself. "This is not God's doing," said Lib. "It's yours." The limp lids fluttered and finally shut. The breathing softened and evened out. Lib kept hold of the swollen hand. Sleep, a temporary mercy. She hoped it would last the night. It occurred to Lib to ask herself why she wanted Anna to live through this Friday night, and the next, and however many nights were left. As a matter of compassion, shouldn't Lib be wishing for this to be over? Never despair, she ordered herself. Think. Think. She struggled to apply her trained mind. What history has a child? The brother, Pat O'Donnell, whom Lib knew only from a photograph with painted-on eyes. How had his little sister become convinced that she needed to purchase his soul with her own? 4.5 months of fasting. How could that much sacrifice be required to make amends for the sins of a mere boy? "Anna?" Only a whisper, then more loudly. "Anna." The child struggled to surface. Lib put her mouth very close to the girl's ear. "Did Pat do something bad?" Eyes still shut, as if she was still in her dream.
"He said it was all right. He said it was double love."
"What do you mean?"
"He married me in the night."
The room stayed still, but the world plunged dizzyingly around it.
"I was his sister and his bride too,"
the girl whispered.
"Double."
Nausea rose through Lib. There wasn't another bedroom. The siblings must have shared this one. How old was Pat? Do you remember?
13, maybe.
And you?
9,
said Anna. Did this happen just once, Anna? A single occasion, or?
Marriage is forever. When brothers and sisters marry, it's a holy mystery. A secret between us and heaven, Pat told me. But then he died,
said Anna, voice cracking like a shell, eyes fixed on Lib.
I wondered if maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe God took Pat because of what we'd done. Then at the mission, the Belgian priest, in his sermon, he said, brother and sister, 'tis a mortal sin. Poor Pat never knew.
Oh, poor Pat knew well enough, thought Lib, to spin a glittering web around the thing he was doing to his little sister, night after night.
He died so fast,
wailed the girl.
He never got a chance to go to confession.
Lib had heard enough. Anna, you did nothing wrong. You didn't know. This was a wrong your brother did to you. Anna shook her head.
But I loved him double too.
Lib couldn't say a word. In the middle of the night, Lib couldn't wait any longer. She felt her way through the kitchen, past the shape of the sleeping maid on the settle. The skin of Lib's face was still tight and salty from weeping. When her fingers found the curtain that partitioned off the outshot, she whispered, Mrs. O'Donnell. Is it Anna? Asked Rosaleen. No, she's fast asleep. I need to speak to you. In private, please. When the doors shut behind them, Lib spoke fast before she could lose her nerve. "I know all about the manor," she began, to gain the upper hand. Rosaline looked back at her, unblinking. "But I haven't told the committee. The world doesn't need an explanation of how Anna's lived all these months. Nobody need ever know that secret. What matters is whether she'll go on living. If you love your daughter, Mrs. O'Donnell, why don't you do everything in your power to get her to eat?" Still not a word. Then, very low, "She's chosen." "She's been chosen," Lib repeated, disgusted. "You mean by God? Called to martyrdom at the age of 11. Rosaline corrected her. "She's made her choice." The absurdity of it choked Lib. "Don't you understand how desperate Anna is? How racked with guilt? She's not choosing any more than she might choose to fall down a bog hole." Not a word. "She's not intact." Lib's circumlocution sounded absurdly prim. "I must tell you that she's been interfered with, and by your own son." The syllables plain and brutal. Rosaline's eyes narrowed. "He began tampering with her when she was only 9. "Mrs. Wright," said the woman, "I won't stand for any more scandal-mongering." Was it too inconceivable a horror for Rosaline to take in? Did she need to believe that Lib was making it up? "That's the same filthy falsehood Anna came out with after Pat's funeral, and I told her not to be slandering her poor brother." Lib had to lean on the gritty wall of the cabin. So this wasn't news to the woman at all. Grief had given Anna the courage to confess the whole shameful story to her mother back in November. Rosaline had called her a liar, and maintained that now, even as she saw her daughter pine away. "Not another word out of you now," growled Rosaline, "and may the devil take you." She swept back inside. Just after 6, Saturday morning, Lib pushed a note under Byrne's door. Then she left the spirit grocery and hurried away across the muddy field under a shrinking moon. This was the kingdom of hell, drifting irretrievably out of the orbit of heaven. And then came a hurrying outline against the lightening sky, and Lib felt at once what she'd never really known until this moment, that the body's claims were undeniable. William Byrne clutched her note. "O'Brien's last night," he said. "No one could talk of anything but Anna. Word spread about you telling the committee she's failing fast. I believe the whole village will attend their special mass." How she wished she could tell him all that she'd learnt the night before, and not just for the relief of sharing it, but because he cared for Anna as she did. No, it would be treachery to expose the secret that the child carried within her puny body to a man. How could Byrne ever look at this innocent girl the same way afterwards? Lib owed it to Anna to keep her mouth shut. She couldn't tell anyone else either. If Anna's own mother called her a liar, so would all the world. "I've come to a dreadful conclusion," she said to Byrne. "Anna can't live in this family. They won't lift a finger to save her. I've watched a child die, and I can't do it again." Byrne nodded. "In your line of work? No, you don't understand. My child. My daughter." Byrne stared. His arm tightened around hers. 3 weeks and 3 days. That's how long she hung on. Was that when Wright left? Lib nodded. "Nothing to stay for," was how he put it. "He didn't deserve you." Oh, but none of it was a matter of deserving. Fate was faceless, life arbitrary, a tale told by an idiot. Lib held onto Byrne's arm like a rope. She found her mind hadn't been quite made up till this minute. "I'm going to take Anna away." Away? Where? Anywhere but here. Her eyes scoured the flat horizon. The farther the better. Byrne turned to face her. "Let's be clear. You mean to kidnap the girl?" "I suppose they'd call it that," said Lib. "How do you propose to travel? Hire a driver?
You'll be caught before you get to the next county. Lib felt her tiredness catching up with her. Odds are I'll end up in prison, Anna will die, and none of it will have made any difference. What Burns said next astonished her. Then it must be tonight. When Lib arrived for her shift at 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, the bedroom door was closed. Sister Michael, Kitty and the O'Donnells were all on their knees in the kitchen. Lib went to turn the door handle. "Don't," snapped Rosaline. Sister Michael murmured.
Mr. Thaddeus is in the middle of giving Anna part of the last rites.
Lib swayed on her feet. A bell rang in the bedroom. Mr. Thaddeus appeared, and Rosaline showed him to the door. "Wait, please," called Lib. She rushed after him. In the farmyard, the man stopped. "Mr. Thaddeus, did Anna talk to you about her brother?" "Mrs. Wright, only your ignorance of our faith excuses your attempt to induce me to breach the seal of the confessional." "So you do know?"
"Mrs. Wright, I've been telling the poor girl for months that her sins are forgiven."
Lib stared at him. Her sins. The priest was halfway down the lane by the time Lib recovered herself. Inside the smoky cabin, Lib had a mission, and she couldn't allow anything to distract her from it. "This special mass tonight at 8:30, she said to Kitty. "How long do these ceremonies last?"
2 hours, maybe 3.
Lib nodded as if impressed. "I'll stay late tonight so that Sister can accompany you all to the mass." It was the slowest day Lib had ever known. The pale sun edged lower in the sky. Would it never go down? 8 o'clock. Anna was shaking.
"How long?"
she kept mumbling.
"Be it done, be it done."
Rosaline O'Donnell came in and hovered over her daughter.
"Will you be all right if we go to the votive mass, pet? Go on."
The girl breathed. Get out, thought Lib. Rosaline placed one kiss on Anna's forehead.
"Goodbye now, lovey."
Then the thump of the front door. Merciful silence. Now it began. She hurried into the kitchen and half-filled a clean bottle with milk, stopping it up with a cork. She chose a bone spoon. There was a discarded oatcake too. Lib wrapped everything in a napkin. Back in the bedroom, Lib drew up her chair very close to Anna. "Anna," she said, "listen to me. I have a message for you."
"From who?"
Lib pointed upwards. "Here's the message. If you could wake up tomorrow and find that you're somebody else, a little girl who's never done anything wrong, would you like that?" Anna nodded. Lib held up the bottle as solemnly as any priest in front of an altar. "Well, this is holy milk, a special gift from God. If you drink this, you won't be Anna O'Donnell anymore. Anna will die tonight, and God will welcome her and Pat into heaven." The girl didn't move, her face a blank. "Your life will start all over again. You're going to be a girl called Nan, who lives far, far away from here." A moment went by. Finally, the muddy eyes lit like fireworks. "Nan," said Anna. "Far, far away." "Yes." Lib produced the milk bottle and filled the spoon. "This is the only way," said Lib. "The price of a new life. Open your mouth." The girl held up one hand.
"Wait."
Lib shook with dread.
"Grace,"
said Anna.
"I must say grace first."
Anna dipped her head.
"Bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts which we are about to receive from thy bounty. Amen."
Then her ragged lips parted for the spoon. Lib tipped the liquid into the girl's mouth. Anna swallowed. Just like that, the fast was broken. Now, a little crumb of oatcake. She put it on the purplish tongue and waited till it had gone down.
"Dead,"
whispered Anna. "Yes, Anna's dead. Wake up, Nan. Time to begin your new life." Lib wrapped the girl up in a cloak, 2 pairs of stockings on the misshapen feet, as well as the brother's boots, mittens on her hands and 3 shawls. She scooped her up, not heavy at all, but as she carried the girl out of the cabin and around the side of the house, Lib could feel her own legs. And then there was William Byrne holding his mare, looming out of the dark. "This is Nan," Lib said.
Good evening, Nan,
said Byrne, catching on fast.
We're going for a ride.
Huge-eyed, the child said nothing.
It's all right, Nan,
said Lib.
Mr. Byrne is going to take you to a safe place and wait with you, and I'll be along in a little while.
Byrne jumped up into the saddle and leaned down for the girl. Lib held out her burden. As Byrne got her settled on the saddle in front of him, Lib tucked the milk and oatcake in his satchel.
Has she eaten?
He mouthed.
Lib nodded.
His grin lit up the darkening sky.
Another spoonful in an hour,
she murmured. Then she went up on her toes and kissed the only part of him she could reach, the warm back of his hand. As they moved off across the field, heading away from the village, Lib hurried back into the cabin. First she knocked over both chairs in the bedroom. Next, her own bag of equipment too, she kicked it towards the chairs. Then she went into the kitchen, retrieved the can of burning fluid and shook a quantity all over the bed, the floor, the wall, the dresser. She put the lid back on the can, only very loosely. She grabbed a lace-edged card from the treasure chest and lit it. It flared up. The holy figure haloed with flame. Lib touched it to the tick, which puffed to life, the old straw hissing crisply. She swung the lamp in her hand and hurled it into the rafters. Rain of glass and fire. Lib ran through the farmyard, her apron flaming in her face. She beat it with her hands. A screech that sounded as if it was coming from some other mouth. She stumbled off the path and threw herself down into the bog's wet embrace. The constabulary had sent 2 men down from Athlone, even though it was the Sabbath. Right now they were picking through the mucky remains of the O'Donnells' cabin. Lib was waiting in the passage behind the Spirit grocery, her burnt hands swaddled in bandages, reeking of ointment. It occurred to her that the fortnight was up. Sunday was always meant to be the day when the nurses reported to the committee. 2 weeks ago, newly arrived, she'd imagined herself impressing the locals with her meticulous account. Not like this. Ash-streaked, crippled, trembling. She checked her notebook, with its blackened cover. Were the final details plausible? Saturday, 20th of August, 8:32 p.m. Pulse, 139. Lungs respirations, 35. No urine all day. No water taken. 8:47 p.m. Delirium. 8:59. Breathing very distressed. Heartbeat irregular. 9:07. Gone.
Mrs. Wright.
The nun was at her side, dark under the eyes.
How are your burns this morning?
They don't matter, said Lib. It was Sister Michael, coming back from the votive mass, who'd found Lib last night, dragged her out of the bog, led her back to the village and bandaged her hands. Sister, I don't know how to thank you. The nun put a hand on Lib's arm above the bandage.
Between you and me, Mrs. Wright, I had a vision. A sort of waking dream. Last night I came away from the chapel early. I was fearful for Anna.
Lib's heart started to pound.
I was walking down the lane when I seemed to see an angel riding away with a child.
She knows, loud in Lib's head. She has our fate in her hands.
Was it a true vision, would you say?
Asked the nun, her gaze burning into Lib. All she could do was nod. A terrible silence. Then,
has the child gone to a better place? Can you promise me that much?
One more nod. Mrs. Wright, called Michael Ryan. 'Tis time. Lib left the nun, but couldn't stop herself from glancing over her shoulder. Sister Michael had her hands joined and her head bowed. She's setting us free. In the back room, there was a stool placed before the trestle tables where the committee sat, but Lib stood in front of it. Flynn spoke up. Nurse Wright, what happened last night? She bent her head as if overcome. Anna just got weaker and weaker. My notes. She laid her memorandum book in front of McBrearty, open where the words and figures ran out. I never thought she'd go so fast. I shouted for help, but no one was within hearing distance. Finally, I tried to lift her,
to put her in the chair so I could push her into the village in search of you, Dr. McBrearty. But the lamp, my skirt must have knocked it over. I didn't know I was in flames till they reached my waist. She held up her mummified hands. By then, one of the blankets had caught fire. I dragged her body off the bed, but it was too much for me. I saw flames licking the can. What can? Asked O'Flaherty. The burning fluid, Mr. Thaddeus told him. I knew the can was going to explode, so I ran. God forgive me, she threw in for good measure. Tears plummeted off her jawline. Truth and lies so mixed up she couldn't tell them apart. I raced out of the cabin. I heard it blow up behind me with an awful roar, and I didn't stop to look. I just ran for my life. The scene was so vivid in Lib's mind she felt as if she truly lived it. She covered her face and steeled herself against their response. It was Sir Otway who spoke up. If you hadn't been so shockingly careless, Mrs. Wright, we could have gotten to the bottom of the matter at least. A post-mortem examination would surely have determined whether the intestines contained any partially digested food. Correct, Doctor? McBrearty nodded. John Flynn burst out. And if nothing was found, the O'Donnells' name would have been cleared. A pair of good Christians have lost their last child. A little martyr. And this imbecile has destroyed all evidence of their innocence. Lib kept her head down. Mr. Thaddeus spoke up at last. But the nurses bear no blame for the child's death. Certainly not, said Dr. McBrearty. They were only servants of this committee. This one shouldn't get her whole pay, though, because of the fire, said the schoolteacher. Lib almost screamed. If these men offered her even one Judas coin, she'd fling it in their faces. I deserve none, gentlemen. "60 below the equator, in the mild sunshine of late October, Mrs. Eliza Wright spelled her name for the chaplain. She adjusted the gloves she always wore over her scarred hands. He moved on to the next line in his log. Wilkie Burns, occupation? Until recently, manager of a printing concern. Does he mean to found a press in New South Wales? Put out a paper for the miners, perhaps? I shouldn't be at all surprised. And Nan Burns, said the chaplain. Is she still troubled by stomach aches and melancholy? The sea air is doing her good already, she assured him. Here they came down the deck now, the bearded Irishman hand in hand with the little girl. I was saying to your bride, Mr. Burns, it has real charm, your little family's shipboard romance. You might even think of working it up for the press. The groom shook his head with a grin. On the whole, said Eliza, we'd rather our days be unwritten. And Wilkie, looking down to meet the child's eyes, then back at Eliza, asked, Shall we begin?
The Wonder by Emma Donoghue was abridged by Neville Teller and read by Carey Mulligan. The producer was Gemma McMullen.